Hey guys, how's it going? Today I've got 3 hours of some of the most creepy Reddit stories I've ever read. So yeah, let's go ahead and get right into it. Today's story is from r/no-sleep from user madnoodles1989. Every missing child becomes a street name. I review digital maps for a living, so I know roads don't appear by accident. Especially not roads named after my dead brother. The ticket came in at 8:42 on a Tuesday, while I was eating cold toast over my keyboard and pretending I hadn't slept badly again. The subject line was boring enough that I almost skipped it. Field verification required. Eli V. Street. Spam, I thought. Then a cruel joke. Then one of those small disagreements that happen when county parcel data and a private mapping company stop trusting each other. Except the road was in Mercy P., my hometown, and Eli V. was my brother. He disappeared in 2003, 6 years old, blue popsicle in his right hand, standing outside B's Market while I went around the side of the building to talk to some kids I wanted to impress. I was 12. He was supposed to wait 5 minutes. That was the number I gave the police. 5 minutes. It became the number everyone handed back to me. You were only gone 5 minutes. A lot can happen in 5 minutes. You were a child too. People say things like that because they need tragedy to have edges. A beginning, a middle, an end. 5 minutes is small enough to hold in your mouth. It sounds like an accident. I opened the ticket. Eli V. Street appeared on 3 independent sources: County GIS, USPS address verification, and 1 commercial satellite layer. According to the metadata, it was a residential access road running north off Junie B Road, just past the old subdivision line. The satellite image showed trees. The county layer showed 12 lots. USPS listed 4 active addresses. A note from another contractor read, "Local government confirms road exists. Requires field validation." I was still staring when the navigation preview loaded. A woman's pleasant artificial voice came through my laptop. In 200 feet, turn left onto Eli V. I hit mute hard enough to make my coffee jump. I hadn't been back to Mercy P in 14 years. Not for my mother's surgery, not for the reunion, not when they found a child's jacket near the old quarry and asked families to submit fresh DNA. I mailed mine from 3 states away and threw up in the post office bathroom afterward. I told my manager I would verify the road in person. She said fine if I wrapped it up by Friday. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Just a weird data thing," I said. That was always how Mercy P started. As a weird thing. A small wrongness you could explain as long as you didn't look at it straight on. The drive was 4 hours. Interstate, then county highway, then 2-lane road that used to make me carsick because Eli would lean across my lap to count cows out my window. He always cheated. Brown one, white one. That one's 2. It has spots. That's not how counting works. It's how mine works. At the town line, my rental's GPS chimed and recalculated, though I hadn't missed a turn. The screen flashed, "Welcome to Mercy P," and beneath it, for half a second, something else appeared. I only caught the first word. Remember. Then it was gone. I pulled into the gas station by the old grain elevator. They'd painted the elevator white since I left, and the paint was already peeling. Gray, showing through like a bone. A new coffee kiosk advertised oat milk, which felt obscene somehow, like a vape shop in a cemetery. The cashier had silver hair and a Mercy P Cardinals sweatshirt. She looked at me, then looked again. People there recognized me by subtraction. Not my face, not at first. The missing boy around it. "You're Helen V's girl," she said. I hadn't used anyone use my mother's name in years. "Mara," I said. Recognition crossed her face, then pity, then caution, in that order. "Back for the house?" "Work." I bought a bottle of water I didn't want. When the receipt printed, she folded it before handing it to me, like it carried something indecent. I looked anyway. 2 Junie B Road, corner of Junie B and Eli V. "This isn't right," I said. The cashier glanced toward the window. "Receipts get funny sometimes. Eli V Street doesn't exist." She smiled, not unkindly, not cruelly either, like a woman who had already survived this conversation with other people. Roads don't need you to believe in them. I left the water on the counter. The afternoon had gone dim in that Midwestern way that feels more like a mood than weather. Clouds sat low over the soybean fields. I drove toward the north edge of town. Mercy P was smaller than I remembered, but grief does that. As a child, your town is the world. As an adult, you come back and find 3 stoplights, a church sign, a Dairy Queen, in a field where someone's dog died. The old streets were still there. Mercer A, Pine S Road, Quarry C. Then I saw the first child's name. Hannah G. Lane. White letters, green sign. Hannah G. disappeared when I was 8. Everyone knew the story because her mother had been baking a birthday cake and sent her outside for being underfoot. 10 minutes. My mother used to drive past their house with both hands locked on the wheel. "Don't stare," she told me once. But Eli stared. Eli always stared. "Where'd she go?" he asked. My mother said, "Somewhere we can't help her." I didn't understand how strange that answer was until much later. Then came Caleb S. Caleb N. Gone from a bus stop in '96. Lily M.C., 5 years old, last seen in her grandmother's yard. Thomas O. Way, missing from the fall festival. I pulled over before Junie B. Road and searched each name on the county map. All active. Residential, rural access, publicly maintained. The records claimed Hannah G. Lane had been established in 1987. Hannah disappeared in '95. I went to the sheriff's office because some childish part of me still believed buildings with flags in front of them had to tell you the truth. The sheriff wasn't the one from my childhood. That man had died of pancreatic cancer. This one was younger than I expected. Broad-shouldered, tired-eyed, with a wedding ring he kept turning with his thumb. His nameplate read DM. "You're Mara V," he said before I could introduce myself. "Everyone keeps doing that. You look like your mother. I'm sorry to hear it." Something almost like a smile crossed his face, then vanished. I showed him my badge, the ticket, the data. "I need to verify whether Eli V Street physically exists," I said, "and why it's named that." He leaned back. On the wall behind him hung a framed civic map of Mercy P, laminated and sun-faded, the kind in every municipal building. I scanned it before I could stop myself. There it was. A thin gray line branching north off Junie B. Road. Eli V Street. "I want that map," I said. "No. You don't even know what I'd do with it." "I know what people do with maps." The sentence sat between us. "My brother disappeared 23 years ago," I said. "I know." "Then why is there a road named after him?" He looked down at his desk. Under the glass blotter was a child's drawing. Yellow sun, stick figures, a dog too big for the house beside it. In the corner, in careful letters, someone had written Ben. "Don't go there after dark," he said. "Official recommendation?" "No." "Then what?" He looked at me. "A lesson this town learned badly." I almost laughed. "You people rehearse this? If you see something you remember, don't stop for it." "That's your advice?" "No," he said. "That's what I failed to do." He slid a business card across the desk. His number was handwritten on the back. "If the road starts using your voice," he said, "call me." I left without the card, then came back for it 30 seconds later. The planning office shared a brick building with the library and smelled like toner and old carpet. I told the clerk I was there about Eli V Street. From the back room, someone dropped a mug. A minute later, June T came out. I hadn't seen June since we were 17, when she told me at the graduation party that leaving Mercy P wouldn't fix what was wrong with me. She'd aged the same way some people do. The same face kept under time, like a room that never changes its wallpaper. Sharp cheekbones, thin mouth, eyes that made you feel she'd already corrected your version of events in her head. "Mara. June. Heard you were in town. I got here 2 hours ago. Small town. Apparently getting bigger." Her eyes flicked to the clerk. "Come back." Her office had no photographs, just binders, file cabinets, zoning maps, and a dead plant on the windowsill. I shut the door. "You know why I'm here," I said. Eli's Road. My stomach turned at how easily she said it. You say that like it's normal. Nobody said normal. I need the development records. You won't find any. I have county authorization. Mara. The way she said my name made me hate her again. Not because it was cruel, because it was tired. She took a keyring from her drawer. You remember the maps we used to draw on? She asked. No. At B's, behind the soda machines. Tommy B stole county maps from his dad's office. We drew fake roads on them. The room seemed to tilt. I remembered the soda machines, the alley behind B's where the pavement was always sticky. June at 12, chewing grape gum, bored by everything. I didn't remember the maps. She watched me not remember. Convenient, she said. Don't. You came here wanting someone else to be guilty. My brother disappeared. I know. You think I forgot that? No, June said. I think you remembered it the way you could live with it. I almost left then. I wish I had. Instead, I followed her through a locked archive to a cabinet labeled Historic Plats, Decommissioned Routes. She set a flat cardboard box on the table. Inside were folded maps. Some official, some photocopied, some drawn by children. The one she handed me had been creased soft as cloth, its edges furred from handling. Across the top, in blue marker, was a title in handwriting I knew before I understood why. Go Somewhere Else Game. It was Mercy P., 2003. But in the blank spaces around the town, children had drawn roads in crayon and pen and pencil. Loops, dead ends. Lines cutting straight through fields and houses. Every road had a name. Not street names, people. Mrs. H, Coach R, Caleb's dog, Stupid T, Mom when she yells. And there, north of Junie V Road, in my 12-year-old block letters, Eli V. I touched the paper. Something rose from it. Blue raspberry, dust, hot pavement. My mouth flooded like I was going to be sick. June looked away first. We all played, she said. I shook my head. You wrote people down when you wanted them somewhere else, she said. Not dead, not hurt, just away. I wanted to ask who she had written. I didn't need to. Behind her desk, through the window, Junie B Road turned sharply where, according to every old map I had ever trusted, it should have kept going straight. I folded the map with shaking hands. You knew, I said. I suspected. You all did. Mara, every town has missing children. Not every town names streets after them. She flinched. Good. Then she said, very softly, Eli's Road doesn't end where he disappeared. I stopped. It ends where he was trying to go. B's Market was still there, though it hadn't been B's in years. Mercy F&F now. Lottery sign in the window, firewood by the door. The soda machines were gone. The alley wasn't. I parked badly and stood on the cracked sidewalk where I'd left him. The world hadn't marked the place. Some part of me had always expected it to. I closed my eyes, and his voice came back so clearly I turned around. If I wait, can I pick the cereal? He'd been wearing the green dinosaur shirt with the hole near the collar from where he'd shoot it when he was nervous. Blue mouth from the popsicle, one front tooth missing, tongue working the gap. I was embarrassed by him. That's the ugliest true thing about my life, and for years I dressed it in softer words. I was distracted. I was young. I wanted 5 minutes. No. I was embarrassed by how openly he loved me, the way he followed me, the way he thought I was the safest person in the world, when I was a mean, frightened girl desperate to be chosen by anyone else. The older kids had been by the alley, June among them. A silver CD player playing something tinny. Someone laughed when they saw Eli holding the hem of my shirt. You brought your shadow again? June said. I heard the rest of it now. Not like memory usually comes, blurred and merciful. Sharp. I told Eli to wait. He asked about the cereal. I said yes. He smiled. Then June held out the map. Write him down. Give him his own road. I remembered laughing. I remembered taking the marker. I remembered Eli trying to see. Is that my road? Yeah. Can it go to our house? Sure, whatever. Then I wrote his name. Not because I believed in anything, because for one clean, poisonous second, I wanted to know what it felt like to walk somewhere he couldn't follow. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. Where are you? Mercer asked. Bees. Leave. I remembered. Then leave faster. What is Eli V Street? Static crackled between us. A child's road, he said. What does that mean? It means he's still trying to get somewhere. The sky had gone dark without my noticing. In the dark glass of the storefront, behind my own reflection, a small boy stood by the ice freezer. Blue mouth, dinosaur shirt, looking at the alley. Not at me. I turned. No one. Mara, Mercer said. His voice was lower now. If you go there, the road will give you what you deserve. That's not the same as the truth. The line dropped. My GPS chimed. Eli V Street, 12 minutes. I don't remember deciding to go. That sounds like an excuse, and maybe it is, but there are moments when guilt becomes a steering wheel. You can take your hands off it. It turns anyway. Junie B Road ran north past the last of the new houses with their identical porches, then narrowed between fields, then trees. No streetlights, no mailboxes, just weed-choked ditches and the gray suggestion of forest beyond. At 6:03, the GPS said, in 400 feet, turn left onto Eli V. Don't say his name, I whispered. In 200 feet, turn left onto Eli V. There was no road. Then there was. Not appearing, not materializing through fog, just suddenly undeniable, as if my eyes had been refusing it and finally gave up. A narrow paved lane opened between two walls of trees. The sign at the corner looked new. Rainwater clung to it, though it hadn't rained. Eli V Street. Below it hung a smaller yellow sign I've never seen on any road anywhere. No outlet unless remembered. I turn in. The blacktop was smooth and new. My headlights washed over the ditch grass. The GPS went silent. My phone lost service. Then the smell came through the vents. Blue raspberry. The road curved and the trees fell away. Bees Market stood ahead of me, lit by a late afternoon sun that didn't reach my car. The old red sign was back, one fluorescent tube flickering. The soda machines leaned against the wall. A small boy sat on the curb, kicking his heels. He didn't look up. His popsicle dripped blue onto the concrete, drop after drop. But instead of running to the gutter, the stain stretched out along the road ahead of me. A thin blue line leading on. I almost opened the door. The boy lifted his head. It wasn't Eli, not exactly. It was my memory of him, which was worse. Too bright, too clear. 6 years old forever, made if the pieces of my guilt had polished until they shone. His mouth moved, and through the closed window I heard him. If I wait, can I pick the cereal? I drove. The market vanished behind me, and the road became a school hallway. My tires rolled soundlessly over beige tile. Lockers ran down both sides. My headlights made no sense there, but they still cut forward, trembling over classroom doors and bulletin boards. Every drawing on the walls was a road. Some went into houses, some went into lakes, some into open mouths. None reached anything. They were the careful, patient work of children who kept getting the way home wrong and kept trying again. At the far end, Eli stood with his backpack on, too big for him, red straps, a dinosaur clipped to the zipper. He was checking the classroom doors. One, then the next, then the next. The way you search a building for someone who was supposed to be there. He had walked those doors before. I understood that the way you understand things in dreams, completely and all at once. He had searched for me in places I had never been, because those were the only places he knew how to imagine. Eli, I said. He turned. His face opened with relief. Not fear, relief. He started toward the car. Not running, just walking, sure of me now. I put my foot down, because if you reached the door, I wouldn't open it, and if I opened it, I would never leave. For a few seconds, the distance between us refused to close, no matter how fast I went. That was the most frightening thing yet. Not that he was chasing me, that he couldn't catch up. Then the hallway snapped back into road. I was crying too hard to see. The next stretch was my mother's car. Not visually, not entirely. The road stayed under my tires, but the air thickened into the inside of her old blue Ford. Stale coffee, wintergreen gum. The radio giving the forecast from the day he went. She sat ahead of me and to the left, hands at 10 and 2. The ring already gone from her finger because she'd pawned it that year. His booster seat was behind her. Empty. Beside it sat me. 12 years old, looking out the window with a face like a drawn blind. "You were gone 5 minutes," my mother said. "Stop," I whispered. "You were gone 5 minutes." The 12-year-old turned her head and looked back at me with dry eyes. She wasn't haunted yet. She wasn't sorry yet. She was just a girl who had gotten what she asked for and hadn't understood the price. "He was always there," she said. Reasonable, almost bored. I just wanted one place he wasn't. I put the car halfway into the trees rather than hear another word. Branches screamed down both sides. When the road straightened again, I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the wheel. And I understood then that the cruelest thing on this road wasn't going to be my mother, or the dark, or whatever waited at the end. It was going to be myself, telling the truth, at 12. Then came my bedroom. The road did not become a house. It went into one. My headlights crossed pink carpet I hadn't thought about in 20 years. Posters, a white dresser, a bead curtain in the doorway, my unmade bed. The car idled in the middle of the room. When I cut the engine, the silence was enormous. On the floor sat Eli, my old road map spread in front of him, the blue marker in his hand. He was trying to draw, tongue poking through the gap in his teeth. "Eli," I said. He looked up. This time he wasn't polished by memory. His hair was messy, the way it really had been. His nose was running. There was dirt on one knee and dried popsicle sticky on his hand. He looked tired. Not dead, not monstrous. Just the tired way a child looks when he's been waiting too long and still believes the grown-up is coming. "Mara," he said. I opened the door. The air smelled like my childhood. Dust, strawberry shampoo, crayons, sun-warm plastic. He smiled. I had forgotten the exact shape of his smile. That was one more thing I had done to him without noticing. "You found my road," he said. I got out. My legs almost didn't hold. "I'm sorry." His smile faded. Not from anger. Children don't know what to do with an apology that big. "You said it could go home," he said. "I know." I made it to go to B's first. The room flickered. For a second, the carpet was pavement, the dresser a soda machine, because that's where you left me. Then to school. Another flicker. Lockers, fluorescent hum. "I thought maybe you went there." He smoothed the map with a small hand, but it kept getting lost. I went down on my knees in front of him. "I tried to remember the way," he said. "I did. The store and the cereal and your room, how you smelled like that orange gum you weren't allowed to chew, your shoes." A broken sound came out of me. He smiled a little. "They had silver stars. They were stupid shoes. I liked them." He looked back at the map. I waited. "I know." "No," he said gently. "I waited, all of them." I won't try to describe what happened in me then. It wasn't crying. Crying is something the body can do and survive. This was older. Something that had been frozen since I was 12 cracked all the way through, and through the crack I saw him. Waiting outside B's as the sun moved, waiting through the police lights, waiting while our mother screamed his name hoarse, waiting while rain washed the blue from the curb, waiting while flyers faded, waiting while I grew taller, learned to drive, kissed boys who didn't know his name, told people I was an only child because it was easier than watching their faces change. He had waited with the kind of patience only a child has when someone they love has promised to come back. "You look old," he said. I laughed and sobbed at once. "I know." "Are you still mad?" "No, I was stupid then." "You wrote me on the map." I couldn't answer. He looked at the paper, then at me. "I thought it was a present. That was the one that did it." Not an accusation, not anger. A little boy who thought his sister had given him a road. His cold fingers around my wrist. "Don't cry," he said. "Why?" His eyes moved to the doorway. The bead curtain was gone. Beyond it wasn't the hallway of our old house. It was a road. New, unpaved, pale dirt under a sky with no color in it. At the end of it stood my mother. She looked younger than when she died and older than when I left, both at once. Her arms hung at her sides. In one hand, she held a folded map. Behind her, street signs leaned at crooked angles. Hannah G., Caleb, Lily Mae, Thomas, Ben M. Names I knew and names I didn't. My mother did not move. She only unfolded the map. Even from across the room, I knew her handwriting. Mara V. Not in crayon, in pen. Dark, deliberate, an adult hand. "When?" I asked. Eli's fingers tightened around my wrist. "The night after I went." The room went cold. She said she only meant 5 minutes, too. For the first time since she died, I understood the way my mother had watched me grow up. Not without love, not with love either. With fear. She had wanted me gone for 1 second. Long enough not to look at what I had done. Long enough to imagine a house where she had only lost one child, and not the wrong one. The town had listened to her too. But Eli's road came first. Drawn earlier by a girl who didn't believe in it. My brother, who thought it was a gift, had walked out onto the road that might have taken me. And he had been trying to find his way back to me ever since. "You have to go," he said. "I'm not leaving you again." He frowned, like I was being difficult about bedtime. "You didn't leave me all the way." "Yes, I did." "No," he said. "You remembered me. I stopped saying your name, but you didn't forget it. Some mercies hurt worse than punishment." He pushed the folded map into my hands. "Take it." "What is it?" "My road." In the doorway, my mother took 1 step forward. The house shuddered. Eli leaned close and whispered, "Keep it folded, and it can't find the end." "Eli, don't let it make a street out of you." Then he ran past me. Not to me, past me, toward our mother. For 1 insane second, I thought he meant to hug her. Then he threw both arms around her waist and held on the way he used to hold on to me when he was tired. Stubborn, sticky-handed, impossible. "Go," he shouted. My mother made a sound. It wasn't a monster sound. That would have been easier. It was grief turned inside out. The walls cracked. The bead curtain flashed in and out of being. Every poster in the room became a map. I ran for the car. When I started it, I looked back. Eli was still holding her. He looked at me over his shoulder, and now he was crying. Really crying. Scared and brave and far too small. I had never let myself imagine him crying. In my memory, he had always been frozen before the fear. "Mara," he called. I rolled the window down. "What?" He smiled through it. "I picked the cereal." Then the room collapsed into road. I drove. I don't know for how long. The road unspooled under me in pieces of other people's children. A kitchen floor, a bus seat, a backyard going dark, a small hand letting go. At one point, I passed Mercer standing beside a sign that read, Ben M. Way. He didn't wave. He took off his hat and held it to his chest as I went by. Then the trees came back. Then Junie B. Road. Then my phone found service, and there was a normal night sky over me, indifferent and full of stars. I pulled over and was sick into the ditch. The folded map was on the passenger seat. It was warm. I didn't stop at a motel. I drove out of Mercy P and kept going until the sun came up. At a rest stop 2 counties over, I opened the map. Most of the roads had faded. Not gone, faded. Like pencil under an eraser. Eli V Street was still there, thinner now. At its end, in a shaky child's hand, someone had drawn a small square house. Inside it were 2 stick figures side by side. One tall, one small. The small one had blue around the mouth. The tall one wore shoes with silver stars. I laughed until people stared. Then I cried until they stopped. When I got home, I filed Eli V Street as invalid. The system rejected the edit. Road verified by local authority. I tried to delete the ticket. The screen went white. When it came back, a new field had appeared. Future extension, Mara V Road. Status, pending. I called Mercer. Disconnected. I called June. No answer. I check the county map sometimes. Eli V Street is gone now. Not unlisted. Gone. The parcel lines have closed over it like water. Satellite only shows trees. But there is a new road on the north side of MRCP. I found the photo in the database one night. The green paint on the sign still looked wet, though the records say it's been there since the year I was born. Mara V Road. I've never driven it. I don't need to. Some mornings, my navigation app suggests it before I type anything in. Some nights, when I unfold the map just enough to check that Eli's Road is still closed, I see the pencil line of mine stretching a little farther. It doesn't lead to Mercy P. Not anymore. Last week, it turned toward my apartment. I keep the map folded. I keep saying his name. No outlet unless remembered. Wow, that was absolutely heart-wrenching. Like, honestly, I'm kinda speechless. Let's read some of the comments on here. I thought it was a present, completely broke me. Phenomenal writing. Yeah, the author really did a good job of portraying how innocent that her little brother was. Talk about a peak story filled with every damn emotion. Yeah, right? This story made me angry at the OP. It made me anxious. It made me sad. It made me feel grief in the OP's shoes. That's how good this writing was. Anyways, let me know what you guys thought about today's story. It's a lot different than anything I feel like I've ever read on the channel, and I think that's part of the magic of reading these stories, is you really just never know what you're going to get, because I don't know if you guys know this, but 99% of the time, I go into these stories completely blind, like we're experiencing it all at the same time. It's from r/no-sleep from user Unalloyed Saint Trina. In the blink of an eye, I forgot everything about myself. Those memories are hidden within something called the Wanting Well, and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get them back. The disorientation was mind-breaking. 16 years of memories, gone, vanished without a trace. 1 second, I was me, whoever the hell that was. I still don't really know. In the next, I was no one. It was like being born standing up. The sun was blinding. There was a slight tremor in the ground, but I could only feel the vibrations in my left heel. I scoured my surroundings, hunting for a shred of familiarity. A buoy to keep my head above water. I saw thick pine trees, a sprawling but ancient 2-story home, a red barn with no animals, prepubescent kids inching closer, palms out, pupils dilated, concerned but fearful. I could label it all, but it was all unfamiliar. None of it was mine. I'd crumbled. By the time I'd collapsed onto the dirt, the small earthquake had subsided. I curled into the fetal position. That only made things worse. My own touch felt cold and alien. Most of the kids were running around like mad, hollering for Miss Daniel. The only one standing still was a short boy with a shaved head and jaundiced skin. He glared at me, clenching and unclenching his hands, spit building at the corners of his mouth as he whispered to himself. At first, the panic was manageable. That changed when I realized I couldn't feel damp earth against my right calf. I reached down. From the thigh on, all I felt was plastic. I slammed my eyes shut and feverishly tried to remember. Who was I? Where am I? How had I lost half of my gosh dang leg? But there was just nothing. Finally, I screamed. Things become blurry from there. I remember bits and pieces. The flashing lights of an ambulance, the metallic odor of a cramped triage room, the bite of an IV entering my arm, and then eventually a doctor, someone who could help. The tests were normal, all of them. Probably best to just move on. Silence. Miss McDaniel had placed a gentle hand on my shoulder, but I bucked my alleged foster mother off and yelled, "That's it?" The man in the coffee-stained lab coat narrowed his wrinkled eyes. He scoffed. "Yep, that's it, young lady." My vision swam. Panic dragged its hot barbs against my skin. He paced towards the door, twisting the proverbial knife as he threw it open. Must be other, cheaper ways to garner some attention, no? It was a long, painful drive home. When we got back, I planted myself in the living room and patiently waited for this fever dream to abate. I commanded myself to wake up. Miss McDaniel sat down next to me. Memory is a fickle machine, Allie. Sometimes it just breaks down, and that's all there is to it. She slid closer. The rusted springs within the antique sofa groaned like a pig in heat. Up close, the old woman smelled equally of butterscotch and manure. Well, would you like something to eat? I didn't respond. Didn't move a muscle, just stared straight ahead, tracing an S-shaped crack in the wall with my eyes, up and down, until I noticed that same boy spying on us from the top of the stairs. His shaved head squeezed between a banister's splintered posts. One of the widow's many other Fosters, I figured. My head whipped towards him. We locked eyes. His were mud brown with sickly yellow sclera, and they seemed too big for his face. A ring of jagged pink scar tissue encircled the top of his shaved head, like a crown had been pressed into his scalp until it bled. He appeared intensely angry at first, but after a second, he smiled. His gums were red and empty, completely, utterly toothless. "What the hell you looking at, kid?" I leapt from the couch, but only felt my left heel connect with the floor. I toppled over. My torso thudded against the hard wood. "Oh, Allie." Miss McDaniel shuffled to a nearby closet and swung it open. She yanked a metal pull string. A small mountain of sneakers flickered in the dim light. I fought back tears as she rustled through the pile. "I know you hate it, but you need it, Poppy Seed." The thing is, I didn't hate my prosthetic. I just forgot I took it off. I did hate the nickname, though. Miss McDaniel was remarkably spry for her age. She knelt beside me, rolling a beige sock over my stump with one hand and snapping the prosthetic into place with the other. I peered up at the stairs. The boy was gone, but he didn't feel gone. Felt like he was just watching me from somewhere else. I went to bed that night, hoping something would be different in the morning. If my memories had departed spontaneously, I figured they could return in a similar fashion. I woke up disappointed. Disappointed, anxious, and painfully hollow. Muted thumps and giggles reverberated through the floor. I rubbed the sleep from my eyes. Threw my left leg over the bed frame, and strapped on my prosthetic. Miss McDaniel had offered to teach me how it worked, but I told her that wasn't necessary. I still knew how. My muscles did anyway. That was the most vexing aspect of the whole damn thing. The memories I'd lost seemed unnaturally specific. Just my identity and my personal history, but nothing more. The fragrant crackle of cooking bacon enveloped me as I stepped out of my bedroom. I paced down the hallway, following the smell, marveling at the strangeness of the house's design. The second floor of that farmhouse seemed more like a barracks than a foster home. I counted 15 small bedrooms, 7 doors on each side, and a single room at the very end. My room was the last room to the left, and naturally, the odd one out belonged to the strange boy. I caught him peeking at me from his doorway as I descended the rickety stairs. Breakfast was good, but chaotic. The Fosters outnumbered Miss McDaniel 12-1. I looked to be the oldest. The youngest was still in diapers. There was a definite recklessness to the arrangement, but as long as Child Protective Services found Mrs. McDaniel's orphan armada well fed, clothed, and happy, I suppose they hadn't preoccupied themselves imagining what could go wrong. The strange boy tiptoed into the kitchen, plopped himself in a corner, and began drawing weird little shapes on the floor in chalk. He never ate with the rest of us. Miss McDaniel didn't appear to mind, or she didn't notice. I figured he was embarrassed to be seen mashing his food with those red, toothless gums. Over the next few days, I learned about my life. It's assumed that both my parents were killed in the Northbridge earthquake of '94. I was found on the streets of LA, dust-caked, dehydrated, missing my right leg from the knee down, but otherwise intact. The Red Cross worker didn't hear me crawling up behind them. Apparently, I damn near gave the poor sap a coronary when I tugged on their pant leg in the dead of night. I told them my name, Allie. They asked about my family, where I'd grown up, or who they could call to claim me, but I didn't answer their questions. They figured I was concussed and couldn't remember, because if I knew, why wouldn't I tell them? Weeks passed. The damage was tallied, and the city was rebuilt. I was never reported missing. No family ever came looking for me. They estimated me to be 10-ish years old, but that's all it was, an estimation. My entire existence was an estimation. Miss McDaniel began fostering me in the spring of '95, back when Mr. McDaniel was still alive. What'd he die of? I asked. We were lounging on the porch, watching the others play tag in the nearby field. She stopped rocking in her chair. A pang of regret squeezed my heart. Why would I ask something like that? My head fell into my hands. Sorry. God, was I always like this? I was relieved to hear her laugh. It was a warm, tinny cackle. A real beautiful noise. Yes, you've always been sort of indelicate. I think that's the first time I ever heard you apologize for it, though. She paused. A cold wind whistled through the field. Technically, Mr. McDaniel passed away from hypothermia, but it was the Alzheimer's that caused him to wander into the woods in the middle of winter. Like I said, memory is a fickle machine. Easy come, easy go. I ran my finger along the crease where my stump met its prosthetic. Can't think of anything I wouldn't do to get mine working again. Be patient. Who knows what tomorrow will... A high-pitched sob interrupted her. One of the kids was on the ground, clutching their arm against their chest, while another stood above them, shrugging in Miss McDaniel's direction. She began pacing toward the ruckus. Well, don't just stand there, Jacob. Help your sister up. I rested my head on the chair's handle and watched the mayhem unfold. It was nice. A bittersweet grin slinked across my lips. Without warning, goosebumps exploded across my skin. Then a voice, slurred and breathy. Hey, Allie, come here. I flipped around. Nausea slithered up my throat. The strange boy was crouching behind the front door with his upper lip lying on the door's edge. Saliva was streaming from his mouth and down the frame, cascading around the copper latch bolt like a boulder in a river being pummeled by rapids. I launched myself from the chair, landed on 2 feet that time. What is wrong with you? His upper lip slowly curled into a fleshy smile. He ripped his mouth from the frame and scuttled backward on all fours. I heard what you said, he yelled from inside, and I can help. I can help you remember. Night was falling overhead. I stared into the shadow-cast doorway, seething with a rage I couldn't begin to comprehend. My gut pleaded for me to stay away. God, I should have listened. Instead, I charged into the farmhouse. Silence greeted me. I scoured the muddy darkness for the strange boy, but couldn't locate him. My heart raced. I took a step back. The front door creaked shut of its own accord. A sharp whisper cleaved through the silence. You want to remember? I can bring you through the wanting well. It's the only way. My gaze darted to the top of the staircase. Yellowed eyes shone in the blackness, with a glassy luster that made them glimmer like Christmas ornaments. You want to remember, right? This only works if you want it. Air caught in my throat. A barrage of defiance rolled across my tongue, but the insults dissolved before they arrived at my lips. Against all logic, I knew he was right. I knew I needed his help. I can't explain how. The feeling was deep and inseparable. The truth seemed baked into my genetics. Reluctantly, I nodded. Well, come on then. The yellow eyes vanished. Scuttling movement reverberated through the walls, a stampede of erratic taps and thumps. Then a click. Hazy light spilled into the second-floor hallway. I steeled myself with a long, shuddering breath and started up the dimly lit stairs. Sweat poured down my legs, collecting in the space between my thigh and the prosthetic. I grit my teeth. My stump was chafing by the time I reached the landing. I peered around the corner. The light was leaking from my open bedroom door. I crept down the hall and entered with unnecessary caution, sliding my prosthetic over the frame and quickly jerking it out, expecting to spring a trap or ambush. I stepped inside. The boy was sitting cross-legged in the corner below the windowsill. He was bent over, sketching strange insignias on the floor with white chalk. You can come closer, he said, patting my bed without looking away from his work. Takes a little patience and some elbow grease to attract the wanting well. I lurched forward. A harsh chill surged through my body. My room was 20 times colder than the hallway, and the air was suffocatingly damp. Felt like I was inhaling slush. The boy dropped his chalk and stared gleefully at his tableau, a crosshatch of elliptical lines intersecting with each other at random, crooked angles. Just looked like a haphazard pile of ivory-colored worms to me, but he seemed quite proud. His head shot up. "Hey, you know what? We've never gotten time like this before." He reached into his pocket and rolled a handful of thin, black needles onto the chalk design. "What do you mean?" I asked, teeth rattling from the otherworldly cold. He licked his lips, dragging his wet tongue around the perimeter with a deliberate sluggishness. "I mean, we don't get to talk much. Anything you want to ask me?" I felt my rage building again. What the hell was he expecting me to ask? How old are you?" His brow furrowed, causing his halo-like scar to dance. "I'd say 6-ish. Without warning, his hand rocketed up and onto the wall behind him. He slammed his palm onto the design, keeping his hand cupped. A muted buzzing emanated from within. Then, with a precision that bordered on elegant, he quickly lifted the cupped hand while his other flew down and skewered a beetle with one of the thin, black needles, nailing it to the floor. The sorry thing thrashed, jerking its legs, twisting its thorax, but it was futile. The needle had pierced the insect right where its head met its wings, with enough force to drive it a half-inch into the hard wood. "Anything else?" My heart stuttered. I thought about begging him to stop. He brought down another needle with a vicious thump. And another. A fourth. A fifth. "Don't got much time left here, Allie. I can feel it getting closer." His assault didn't waver. Not for an instant. He just kept bringing the needles down, in different places, at different angles, but never through the head. He needed it alive. Just barely alive. Thump, thump, thump. Why do you know how to do this?" "Because 6-ish years ago, I arrived here in between, so I can see the in-betweens. Like the wanting well. Found out how to use it. I had to, in order to live." The insect-turned pincushion wasn't struggling anymore. He took a deep breath and placed his fingertips on the rounded ends. In-betweens don't get to live. Not unless they're willing to figure out how to extract some life for themselves. He began delicately manipulating the needles, pushing some away, pulling others closer. The movements were tiny and exquisite, like he was playing a noiseless instrument. Reality bent to his flow. He expanded his fingers. The temperature surged, icy to scorching in an instant. I stumbled back. Pressure built in my skull. He pulled his fingers to the right. The walls bowed inward, as if a black hole had materialized in the center of my bedroom. I fell forward. My chest came crashing into the floor, knocking the air from my lungs. I flipped onto my back and peered up at him. His scar was pulsing. The arteries in his yellow-tinged eyes were burning bright red. He crawled over the impaled beetle towards me. I heard the front door open. Distant chatter graced my ears. I tried to scream for Miss McDaniel. Nothing came out. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. His head appeared over mine. His toothless mouth was wide open. Hot saliva dripped onto my paralyzed face. It smelled like rot. My name would have been Alfie, by the way. Very rude not to ask. He scampered out of the room and slammed my door shut. I heard his door open and close in turn. My eyelids grew heavy. Rabid fear couldn't even keep them up. The world blackened. I drifted off, but not to sleep, to somewhere else. Somewhere in between. There's a whoosh, like water rushing through a pipe, louder and louder, a deafening swell, and then unseen fingers rip my eyes open. I'm still lying on the floor in the dark, but there's something above me, something that can't be there. A circle of stone with a wooden arch and a deep black pit at its center. A well is jutting from the ceiling. I should be afraid. There's plenty to be afraid of. The stone is squishing against itself, quivering like an intestine. The whoosh is reverberating from inside the wall. A hand is beginning to descend from the black pit, stretching to an inhuman length in order to reach me. But I'm not afraid. I feel blissful or numb. It's hard to tell the difference. I smile because I know the answers are in there, my answers. Who I am, where I came from, what happened to my leg. Everything I want is in the well. My arm feels weak, but I'm able to lift my hand off the floor. The hand from the pit is only inches away. I hear something. My smile falters. It's Miss McDaniel's voice. She's not saying anything. Her voice is just floating through the atmosphere, humming like the wind. My numbness melts. Unparalleled horror takes its place. The well convulses. The hand becomes violent, swatting the air, grasping for my neck. I don't want to know. Not like this. The whoosh fades. I sprang up, clutching my chest, gasping like I haven't inhaled for hours. It was dawn. I surveyed my room. The impaled bug was missing, but a fine layer of white dust coated the floor below my windowsill. The pattern had been smeared into obscurity. It was still proof, though. None of what happened the night before was a dream. I latched on my prosthetic and stormed into the hallway. I wasn't thinking. I had no plan. Blind fury guided me forward. I battered Alfie's door, pummeled it until my fist began to ache. I twisted the knob, but it was locked. I threw my hands over my head in frustration. The faraway clatter of breakfast curled into my ear. Miss McDaniel, she'd give me answers. I stomped downstairs. In my haste, I tripped on a loose nail, skipped the last few steps, and landed nose first onto the dirt-caked entry mat. There was a visceral snap. Blood poured down the back of my throat. The floorboards shook as everyone came to investigate the commotion. Allie, oh my God, are you all right? Miss McDaniel tried to help me up, but I slapped her away and scrambled to my feet, panting like an animal. Where the hell is Alfie? I growled. The other Fosters took a step back, cowering. Miss McDaniel cocked her head. Alfie? Yes, he's one of your Fosters, you senile old lady. Scar around his head, toothless, sleeps in the room at the very end of the hall, the one after mine. Lord help us, how could you possibly forget him? Her brow furrowed. The room at the end of the hall? I nodded furiously. My posture loosened. Silent tears dripped down my cheeks. The pain in my sinuses was ramping up quickly. Miss McDaniel instructed the others to wait in the kitchen. Then, slowly, with patience and warmth, she approached and pulled me into a hug. I sobbed into her shoulder until it hurt too much to cry. She tilted my head up and inspected the injury. Well, I think we gotta return to the hospital. I'll give Betty a call. She'll come look after the others. While we wait for her to drive over from the church, can I show you something outside? I nodded. Miss McDaniel led me around to the back of the farmhouse. Which window is yours, Poppy Seed? I put my hand up to shield my eyes from the sun and pointed. My mouth went dry. She didn't say anything else. She didn't have to. I imagine the realization was written all over my pale, mangled face. My window was at the very edge of the second floor. There wasn't enough space for a room at the end of the hall. That second trip to the hospital reshaped my life for the better. The doctor who examined my nose wasn't some surly, holier-than-thou chauvinist. He was a young man overflowing with nervous energy, talked like a machine gun, zipped around the exam table like a coked-out housefly. He was certainly odd, but he got the job done and then some. My nose wasn't broken, thankfully. We were about to leave when the doctor started digging into what exactly caused me to trip in the first place. I hesitated, but his slapstick quirkiness was disarming. I trusted him. So, I told him everything. The memory loss, the wanting well, Alfie. He listened intently. So much that he didn't say a word throughout the whole protracted explanation. After I was done, he admitted me to the inpatient floor to run additional tests. Turns out, I'd been suffering from atypical seizures. It didn't completely explain the memory loss, and complex hallucinations aren't usually the sole manifestation of a seizure disorder, but the evidence was undeniable. The young doctor showed me the electrogram findings. My brainwaves looked like a radio frequency gone haywire. I was sent home with anti-seizure meds. Whenever Miss McDaniel asked, I told her things were improving. My memories hadn't resurfaced, but I felt much better, and I wasn't seeing Alfie anymore. that was only the partial truth. First off, I didn't feel great. I was pretty depressed. Day by day, the emptiness I experienced seemed to fester. It made life taste like ash, but I think I hid my misery pretty well. That said, I never stopped seeing the door at the end of the hall. It was blurry, but it was there. Sometimes I thought I heard whispering behind it, incensed muttering that I couldn't make heads or tails of. I tried to ignore it. More importantly, though, Alfie did seem to be gone. There were a few occasions where I could have sworn I glimpsed his glassy yellow eyes in the darkness of my bedroom, but it would end up being headlights from a passing car reflecting through my window. Time marched on. I rebuilt myself the best I could, but it was an act. A show I put on for Miss McDaniel. She was such a kind, generous, beautiful person. She deserved to die believing I had recovered. It was the least I could do. She passed 6 years after I lost my memories. Cancer, metastatic, in her bones, lungs, and her brain. She seemed happy to know she wouldn't burden her fosters for too long. It took her quickly and without fanfare. Per her request, I scattered her ashes in the woods around the farmhouse. She became fixated on the state of Mr. McDaniel's soul at the very end, worried that, even in death, he was still wandering the forest, lost and alone. She said she'd show him the way home. If anyone could, it'd be her. My grief was crippling. Miss McDaniel was my rock, my anchor to the world. Losing her felt like losing my memories a second time. Without her, I was no one. I had relationships with the other fosters, yes, but it wasn't the same. Not by a long shot. So, with no prospects and nothing better to do, I gave the whole apathetic mid-20s death spiral thing a try. If you've seen a movie in the last 2 decades, you probably know the drill. Whiskey with breakfast, harder drugs with dinner, staying with dodgy strangers to facilitate sleep, rinse and repeat. Whatever it took to distract myself from the terrible emptiness. One day it occurred to me that I hadn't taken my anti-seizure meds in months. Far as I could tell, nothing changed. That was pretty amusing, for about 30 seconds. Then it was back to status quo. But it was becoming harder to disregard the emptiness. My time-worn tricks weren't fixing the problem. What's more, I began to believe my memories weren't lost because I could feel them inside my head. Sequestered, but not truly gone. And for a moment, there was this minuscule glimmer of hope. That hope swiftly mutated into a constant, unrelenting itch. An itch that I couldn't possibly scratch. Sleep was the first thing to go. I'd toss and turn all night, trying my damnedest to ignore the itch. The feeling of an earthworm burrowing through my scalp. No booze was strong enough. No drug was potent enough. The memories were entombed somewhere deep in my skull, begging for release. It was the purest form of torture imaginable. Then, like a gift from the divine, an ad popped up on my phone's internet browser. Amnestic backtracking. Clinical trial in the reversal of memory loss. Click here for details. I was ecstatic to learn that the physician running the trial could see me that afternoon. Please, just call me Richter. I don't love the doctor title. Always felt vain to me. We shook hands. Heat gathered in my cheeks. Bashful wasn't ever my default setting, but the man was undeniably handsome. Broad shoulders with a thick-set jaw and chestnut-colored eyes. He motioned for me to sit. I smiled and set myself down, buttoning up my flannel in the process. The AC in his office seemed to be working overtime. How does this go, exactly? He smirked. It's all fairly straightforward, even more so in your case. Normally, the study requires certain blood tests and brain imaging as a baseline before we can initiate the experimental therapy. But I've reviewed your electronic record, and you've already had all the prerequisite tests. In other words, we can begin the amnestic backtracking today. In patients who've responded, we've seen positive results within hours. And because this clinical study is hurting for participants, it'll all be free of charge. My jaw dropped. I was floored. Engrossed in a state of euphoric disbelief. I surveyed his office. It was sparse and unadorned, just a desk and a few chairs. No futuristic machines or vials of medicine. So, is it something you send to my pharmacy, or... He leaned over his desk, chuckling. No, Allie. Amnestic backtracking is more of an in-house therapy. Richter stood and gestured to a nearby door. If you feel ready, if you want our help, go on ahead. I'll meet you in there. I used the edge of his desk as a fulcrum, pushed myself upright, and paced over to the door, beaming with hope. My hand hovered over the knob. Apprehension crackled down my spine. A laundry list of red flags began accumulating in my brain. Richter looked exceptionally similar to the young doctor who diagnosed my seizures, someone I trusted. The air in this room was cold and damp, and I could barely feel the itch in my skull. He chuckled with taut lips, like he didn't want me to see the inside of his mouth. My body trembled. I closed my eyes, and I heard something. A horrible noise. A desperate, animalistic wail. It wasn't growing louder. It wasn't getting closer. It'd been there the whole time, but I couldn't appreciate it until now. It had been concealed. I glanced over my shoulder. There was a small, bloodied deer writhing in the corner. A bouquet of long, black needles had been driven through its torso. Its movements were twitchy, sporadic, and languid. It was nearly dead, but not quite. An incomprehensible mass of chalk lines besieged the sacrifice from every direction. The floor, the walls, the ceiling. I think I could have run, but I didn't. What would be the point? I had nothing to run back to. I placed my hand on the knob, twisted it, rammed my shoulder into the door, and plunged myself into the patient darkness lying in wait on the other side. Whoosh. Unseen fingers rip my eyes open. The air smells of blood and smoke. I can hear the faint tapping of rubble falling around me. A cracked light bulb flickers overhead. Weak bursts of golden static outline the devastation. A woman, crushed down the middle, bisected by a massive wooden support beam. A man, buried beneath chimney bricks, his dead hand peeking out from the debris, immortalized in the shape of a claw, fingernails digging into the dusty rug. And a young girl, missing the bottom half of her right leg. She's alive, but for some reason, she's not moving. She's sitting upright, still as a statue. This is it. Me as a child. My mother, my father. The Northridge earthquake of '94. This is my history, my answers. Everything starts moving, ghostly and autonomous. Shattered picture frames converge and hang themselves neatly on the wall. A mahogany armoire rebuilds itself, piece by piece. The bulb's light becomes brighter. Other bulbs reform completely. The damage is reversing. I'm backtracking through memory. Suddenly, the younger me tilts backward and begins convulsing. Her skin ripples. Thousands of narrow white threads seep from her pores. Once the last one is out, her spasms stop. The threads congregate above her in a tangled cluster. They jettison through the room like the tentacles of a man-o'-war jellyfish drifting through the ocean. The beam that killed my mother begins to shake. Blood soaks into her body. Her flattened bones crack and expand. As the beam rises, the white threads re-enter my mother, and she takes shape. I clutch my chest. My throat tightens. I grasp at a tiny fragment of understanding. Her belly is round. It protrudes far from her waist. My mother was pregnant. She was about to give birth before she died. I feel my eyes become magnetized to one of the reformed pictures on the wall. A black and white ultrasound image with a small, handwritten label at the bottom of the frame. Alfie. He arrived here in between, dead and alive. I remembered what he said at the farmhouse. In-betweens don't get to live, not unless they're willing to figure out how to extract some life for themselves. When my mother died, my unborn brother invaded me, commandeered my body, stole my life. That day at Miss McDaniel's farmhouse, he lost control, took his hands off the wheel, and regained my sovereignty. But he's still locked up inside me, and somehow he's concealed my memories. He's been using them as a bargaining chip, leverage, a way to take back control. The chimney bricks covering my father began to rumble. Just like the rest of the debris, they rebuild themselves, but they build something new, a circle of bricks with a black pit at its center. The wanting well. One by one, I watched them climb in. My father, then my mother, then young me. I can't see any of their faces clearly. They're crackling with static. I walk across the small, quaint home and peer over the side of the well, into the black depths. Everything I've wanted, all the memories that I've pined so desperately for, they're in there. My palm grips the edge. It feels like flesh, wet and squelching, pulsing faintly. Something stopped me from throwing myself into the well before, right? Yes, it was Miss McDaniel's voice. I perk my ears, listening for her tender hum. But there's nothing. It's deathly silent. Because she's gone, dead and buried, no longer with me. I'm nobody. Who I am is in the well. I have no choice. I prepare to descend, lifting my prosthetic and resting it on the edge of the well. But I pause. It's all a lie, isn't it? Knowing the truth won't make me whole. And even if she's not with me, I'm still somebody. I pull my prosthetic away from the pit and turn. On the opposite wall, the door I entered through is still there. I force myself to move. The gravity around me becomes weaponized, resisting me, pushing me back. I fight forward. I need to leave, not for Miss McDaniel, not for anyone, for myself. The knob is warm to the touch. What the hell are you doing? I glance over my shoulder. Alfie's looming near the well, horribly amalgamated. One arm is a newborn's, the other is Richter's. His skull is bulging, uneven, cancerous. An umbilical cord the width of a fire hose droops from his stomach, wrapping around his feet and into the wanting well. I'm offering you everything, a perfect catalog of your life, who you were before I took the wheel, who your parents were, how you lost your leg, all of it. Hell, I can even give you your real name. You realize Allie is just a placeholder, right? You can hide inside those memories until our body finally gives out. He points into the black pit with his adult arm. Now get in. He's attempting to look threatening, but his resolve is faltering. His amalgamated body is trembling. It was never supposed to be like this. I was distracted for a second, 1 second, and you spring up like a gosh dang weed. Tears are welling in his jaundiced eyes. I'm sorry, Alfie. I turn and twist the knob. He screams with 20 separate voices and begins sprinting towards me. I can feel him grasping for me. I slam myself into the door. My body collapses into an abandoned office. I see chalk dust and bloodstains in one of the corners, but the dying deer is gone. I resume my anti-seizure medication the next morning. Things have been quieter since, but I know he's still there, waiting patiently, watching my every move, vying for control. There might come a day where Alfie overtakes me, a day where I'm forced into the wanting well. But until that day comes, I refuse to exist in between. I've given myself a name, and for the first time in my life, I will live. Poppy. Well, I am quite literally at a loss for words. I've read a lot of Unalloyed St. Trina's writing, and I gotta say, this one takes number one. The ending of this one, though, completely changes how you look at the whole story. You don't know who Alfie is throughout the whole story, but once you get to that last creepy interaction with him, you realize that he had bad intentions from the very beginning. This one had one of those endings that doesn't rely on like a cheap jump scare at the end. It leaves you sitting there pondering life. The next story's from r/nosleep from user Something Goes Here Too. The lake on my brother's property has no bottom. Me and my brother live on 25 acres out in the middle of nowhere. He inherited it when our dad passed. Our mom and stepdad had already died a few years back, so it's just the two of us. When I say out in the middle of nowhere, I really mean out in the middle of nowhere. A 30-mile drive to the nearest grocery store, 40 to the nearest big city. But we like it. It's nice and quiet. My brother Carl is an artist. Not an artsy artist. He does design work for big companies out on the East and West Coast. Does all his work on a computer. He can work from pretty much anywhere that's connected to the internet. Now, it costs quite a bit to get internet in the middle of nowhere, but it's possible, and he can more than afford it. Me? I'm Jake. I'm a shiftless, no-good, lazy layabout. At least that's what my stepdad always said. My bio dad, when he wasn't being an abusive drunk, would say pretty much the same thing. That's fine. I've made my peace with it. I keep busy by taking care of the place, doing the lawn care, the maintenance, painting, all the crap work that needs to be done. We have a pretty simple life. The strangest thing about this place is the lake. Well, it's actually just a glorified pond. It's about 80 feet across and almost a perfect circle. Sinkhole, I guess. It's way out on the edge of the property past the gazebo. Officially, it's known on the maps as Lake 224, but everyone calls it Gasper's Lake, after some fella that lived here like 100 years ago. The water is unbelievably clear, way more clear than I would have ever expected. And deep. The thing is, I have no idea how deep it is. I heard rumors in town that it's bottomless when we first moved out here, but I paid no mind. But you can't see the bottom at all. One summer, I had a fella from the state fish and game department come out and stock the lake with fish. I thought I'd do some fishing that fall, but it just didn't take. Don't know how or why, but come fall, there wasn't a fish to be found. Didn't make any sense. If they died, I'd have seen them floating, right? Another thing is the light. Sometimes at night, I could swear I see a glow come up out of the water. I got a nice little setup. I'd sit at the gazebo until late in the evening grilling bratwurst and sipping cold beer from the cooler. But on the way back, that glow. A color that's just not right, you know? Not bright or anything, you can just barely notice it. But it's there. Anyway, my brother doesn't care about any of that shit. He's got no sense of adventure, no curiosity. He's all about deadlines, meetings, and products. Sometimes he'll fly out from the local airport on a puddle jumper to go see a client and leave me out here for a week or two. You'd never get me on one of those tiny single-engine planes. I kind of get the feeling he's embarrassed of me, but whatever. He flew out to North Carolina, or maybe it was Virginia one week, and I had the place all to myself. So I called up Earl. He's my drinking buddy. I called up Earl and said to him we're going to find out how deep Gasper's Lake really is. He brought over his John boat, and I'd say 300 feet of half-inch nylon rope. We were going to be real scientific about this. I tied a cinder block to one end, and we marked off the rope in 10-foot sections. He backed up his truck to the water, we got the boat in, and headed out to the center of the lake, and dropped the cinder block over. I figured it'd bottom out at 50 feet or so, but shit no, that rope just kept flying right on out. 50 feet, 100 feet, 150, just kept going. Maybe we should tie it off? I asked. Yeah, that's probably a good idea, he replied. We got the free end of the rope tied off around the cleat and watched the rope keep spilling out. Every bit of the rope played out and the boat resonated with a loud thunk. I pulled the rope a bit up out of the water and could feel the weight of the cinder block on it. Earl, I paused. Earl, there's not any way this lake is 300 feet deep, I said. No way, he nodded. What the actual hell? We gotta get more rope, I said. My uncle's got a full industrial spool of half-inch nylon rope, 1,000 feet. There's no lake anywhere around here that's 1,000 feet deep, Earl replied. I grabbed the rope and started to pull it up. It was gonna take a minute or two to pull it all back on the boat. Earl started winding it up as it came. I got about 50 feet of it on board when it just stopped. Like, dead stop. I leaned back and pulled harder. Nothing. It felt like the cinder block had gotten caught under a ledge. I wrapped the rope around my forearm and gave it one good heave. Hung on something? Earl asked. I guess so, I started to say when the rope tugged back. Hard. Threw both me and Earl off balance enough, the boat flipped over. The water went over my head and I sputtered, righted myself and broke the surface. Earl came up right beside me and let out a loud, "Gosh dang it." We struggled to get the boat set right, but we got it. That's when I noticed the cleat had snapped right off. Rope and all had gone down into the lake. So, 3 days later, me and Earl were back again. We spent all afternoon setting it up. Got an electric motor to pull the rope back up and a pulley system at the end of a boom winch. It almost looked professional, bolted there in the back of his truck. Almost. Earl grinned and smacked our jerry-rig setup on the side. I always knew those machine shop classes I took would come in handy. He backed up the truck and swung the winch over the water. It extended about 10 feet out. I tied off another cinder block, no shortage of those around here, and tossed it in. We watched the rope run and run, the spool spinning freely. We had it set up so it would spin in one direction, but not the other, so we could winch it back up. The rope spooled out faster and faster. 200 feet, 300 feet. It's still going, Earl said, incredulity in his voice. 400. No freaking way, I said. Earl stopped grinning, around 600. By 800, neither of us was talking anymore. The spool kept spinning all the way to the end. 4 minutes after I tossed the brick in, it ran out with another loud thunk. Hard enough, the truck rocked backwards a bit. Jesus, Jake, what in the actual hell is going on here? That's 1,000 feet of rope. I have no earthly clue, buddy. There's no way it's 1,000 feet deep. I ain't got no more rope. Like, I guess I could order some, Earl said, but was interrupted by a loud groaning coming from the winch. Something was pulling on the rope. I could hear the strain in the fibers. The truck was practically vibrating. Then, the front end of the truck started to rise up a hair. Aw, shit, Jake. It's gonna take my truck. Sorry, guys. I'm just picturing these two guys. It's gonna take my truck. Earl yelled as he ran over and hopped in. He started the engine and began to pull away when, all of a sudden, all the tension let out of the line. I went over to the winch and turned it on, and the rope began to wind onto the spool. It took a lot longer to pull it all up than I thought it would. But then I saw and smelled the cinder block. It was covered with a dark, glistening slime, something the color of rotting leaves mixed with oil, and it stank like, God, I don't know, a squish bug mixed with kerosene. I cut the line and let the brick drop back into the water. No way in hell I was touching whatever that was. Earl pulled his truck up away from the edge, got out, and came over to where I was staring at the water. A camera, he said. What, like an underwater one? I asked. Yeah, I know a guy. He's got an underwater rig, a little robot submarine. He uses it to inspect bridge pilings, dams, and culverts for the state. It's rated down to 1,500 feet, but it usually doesn't get used that deep. Got lights and a camera. You can drive it around, he said. Sounds like a plan, I said. But Earl, I paused. Isn't this more than a little bit weird? Like, even for around here, maybe we should call somebody. I don't know, like an official? Jake, this is the most interesting thing that I've been mixed up in since Farmer Brindle's two-headed goat got loose in the dollar store. Look around, nothing happens around here. I nodded. This place wasn't known for its excitement. I'm gonna call him. Get it out here, he said. I've got an old VCR we can hook it up to. Record what we find, I replied. Earl nodded. Good idea. The next couple of days passed without incident. I spent the time power washing the garage. I know, high excitement, but it's gotta get done. Earl pulled up in his truck the next afternoon. It was a pretty cool setup. The sub was about 4 feet long and had lights and a camera on the front that could be panned around remotely. We tied it off to the winch with a nylon rope. It had its own coil of cable for the camera that we sat on the tailgate. I made sure it had a full charge, Earl said, manhandling it out of the truck. It'll give us at least a couple of hours. Getting it in the water took longer than it should have. The thing was heavier than it looked, and we kept second-guessing which end was supposed to go in first. I think the camera end goes in last, I said. That doesn't make any sense. How's it going to see anything pointed at the mud? I didn't say pointed at the mud. I said last, as in we lower it in tail first. Earl looked at me. That's the same thing. We went back and forth on it for a while before we figured out it didn't matter. The thing would right itself once it hit the water. We felt pretty stupid about that. All right, easy now, Earl said as we walked it to the edge. It was awkward. No good place to grip it. For God's sake, Jake, don't drop it. That thing probably cost more than my truck. We got it in without dropping it. Barely. Earl picked up the controller and we watched it bob there for a second, listing a little to one side, and then it straightened out and sat there humming quietly. Okay, Earl said. Down we go. 300 feet down, it was dark enough that we snapped on the lights, fully bright. All it showed was the rough stone of the side of the sinkhole. The water was still crystal clear. Around 400 feet, the walls changed. I almost missed it. Earl, hold up, can you back it up a little? He reversed the sub, and we both leaned in toward the monitor. The rough pitted limestone we'd been watching for the last 10 minutes had stopped. What replaced it was dark and smooth, almost glassy. I looked at Earl, and he looked at me. We both looked at the monitor. That ain't natural, I said. We stayed there a minute, both of us staring at the screen. The sub's lights caught the dark surface and threw back a dull reflection. Whatever it was, it went down as far as we could see. Earl's hand was still on the controller. Want me to keep going? He asked. I should have said no. Yeah, I said. Keep going. At 800 feet, the walls just disappeared. The sub drifted out into the open water, and I realized I'd been holding my breath. The sinkhole had been feeding into something else the whole time, a cavern. The sub's lights didn't reach the far walls, didn't reach the bottom, just open black water in every direction, and the hole we'd come through sitting in the ceiling like a drain in reverse. Earl, I said. Yeah, he said. Neither of us said anything for a minute. The sub just hung there in the dark, lights cutting maybe 30 feet in any direction, and then nothing. God, Earl said quietly, I wish I'd brought some beer. I laughed, couldn't help it, then stopped. Keep going down? I asked. He already was. Can you point the lights down? Earl adjusted the controller and the sub nosed down slowly. The lights swept across what I thought was the bottom of the cavern, and I squinted at the monitor. Something was down there. A tangle of shapes, thick and dark and piled on each other like cable left in a heap. What the hell am I looking at? Earl said, mostly to himself. The sub drifted lower. The shapes resolved a little. Thick as tree trunks, some of them thicker. Coiled loosely over and around each other, tapering at the ends, widening in the middle. Some of them were moving, drifting, kinda like seaweed. Earl, I see it. One of the big ones began to uncoil. It peeled away from the mass, and as it moved, it revealed a surface beneath it. Dark and rounded and covered in a texture I couldn't make sense of at first. It was dark and bumpy like an old avocado. I was still trying to figure out what I was looking at when it split open down the middle. It was an eye. Had to be 20 feet across. The iris was the color of old bronze, and the pupil was shaped like a triangle, and it was looking up at the sub. My stomach dropped straight out of me. Then the rest of them started moving. All of it, the whole mass, coming apart into individual shapes. Eyes on every surface. Mouths too, rows of teeth catching the light, opening and closing on nothing. The cables, the arms, whatever they were, filled the cavern below us. The monitor went dark. Shit, Earl, we have to get the hell out of here, I screamed. But Earl seemed frozen. I grabbed Earl's arm. He was still staring at the monitor. Earl, we have to go, right now. The surface of the pond began to swell and boil. Whirlpools and waves churning around. He blinked, came back. We ran for the truck. We dove in and Earl started it up, but we didn't make it even 20 feet before the back end lifted. It had come up fast. Nothing that big should be that fast. The tires left the ground and Earl screamed something I couldn't make out over the sound of the frame starting to give. I had opened the door and jumped out without even thinking of it. The ground came up quick and I landed with a wet crack as my ankle snapped. From the ground, I could see the truck maybe 30 feet up, wrapped in something that looked like a giant black and glistening worm, being pulled toward the water. Earl was still in there. I know because I could hear him screaming. Then the roof caved in to the sound of shattering glass and metal forced beyond its limit. And then I couldn't hear him anymore as the truck sank beneath the water. The VCR had landed a few feet away. I don't even remember Earl throwing it. I told the paramedics I fell off a ladder. Anyway, now I don't know what to do. My brother's due back in 2 days, and the sheriff keeps coming around asking about Earl. The state inspection fellow wants his submarine back, and I don't know what to tell him. All I got is this busted leg and the video we took, and I'm not sure who I need to show it to. I think I'm going to call the governor. Maybe the press? Should I call the FBI? What should I do? Dang, R.I.P. Earl. Seemed like a cool guy. I mean, I think calling the FBI is definitely a great first step. Somebody responded to this post saying, "Call the local game warden." I don't think the local game warden's going to be able to do much for you here. And then the best comment of all: "You befriend the beast by any means necessary. Any means necessary. Declare yourselves a nation state and let that abomination do the bidding for you." Now this is what you do. The first story today is from r/no sleep from user nocardiologist1353. I inherited my grandfather's farm. He left me one rule: never go barefoot. I was never much of a country guy. If I'd had the choice, I would have spent my whole life in a city somewhere, surrounded by people instead of empty fields. But we don't always get to choose, and in my case, death chose for me. I never knew my parents. They died before I was old enough to recognize their faces. I remember looking at their pictures in my grandparents' home as a child and knowing I should feel some connection to them, but I never did. They were strangers to me. My grandparents on my mother's side raised me, and growing up, I occasionally heard rumors of my father's dad, my other grandpa. I never met him, but he's changed my life, and not for the better. I'll never forget that day. I was days away from graduating from university with a degree in social studies when I received a package in the mail. It informed me that my grandfather, Arnold, who had lived in Oklahoma, had passed away. And to my shock, he left his entire estate to me. I reread the legal papers several times, and what it said never changed. My grandpa left me his farmhouse, 2 barns, and 85 acres of land. At the bottom of the statement was the number of my grandpa's lawyer, who I was supposed to call. I didn't want to get my hopes up in case there was a catch, so I wasted no time and dialed the number. "Thank you for calling Hartman & Co. How may I help you?" A pleasant, yet professional female voice answered. Yeah, hi. I received a packet regarding my grandfather's estate, and I'm supposed to talk to Mr. Hartman. I'm not very good at talking on the phone." "One moment," she replied before the line went on hold. It didn't take long for the deep, smooth voice of an older man to fill my ear. "This is Hartman." "Yes, Mr. Hartman. My name is Timothy. I believe my grandfather Arnold was a client of yours." Even through the phone, I could tell that Hartman was smiling. "Oh, yes, Timothy. Your grandfather was more than a client. He was a good friend, and I'm so sorry for your loss." I shrugged to myself. "I didn't know him," I said. "Even still, he was family. Anyways, how may I help you, son?" "Yeah, I got your packet and..." Say no more. You're quite fortunate your grandfather left you his entire estate. I've handled most of the transfer process, but I'll need you to sign the documents I've sent you and mail them back to me." "Got it," I replied. "Anything else?" "Well, yes, actually. It would be helpful if I knew what you intend on doing with the place. Do you want to sell it, or are you planning on living there?" I thought for a moment. On one hand, moving to the middle of nowhere in Oklahoma sounded like hell on earth. But then again, with the current state of the economy, I'd practically given up on the dream of ever owning a house as large as my grandfather's property, so being gifted such a thing was a dream come true. I kinda want to keep it, but I don't know anything about farming. Hartman chuckled. "Don't worry about that. Your grandfather himself hadn't farmed the place in years. He rented out the acres to his nearest neighbor, who I'm told wants to keep the same arrangement with the next owner. It'd be a decent source of passive income for you." At this, I got a little more excited. "Well, all right then, let's do it." "I think that's a good choice, son. I'll be in touch, but for now, you take care." With that, he ended the call, and I could hardly believe my luck. My college buddies thought I was insane. "You're seriously moving out there? Just sell the dump," one said. "I bet I have more brain cells than that entire state combined," another laughed. "You'll probably get killed by rednecks," scoffed another. But I didn't care. Most of them were going back to living in their parents' basements while I had my own house on my own land. Graduation passed, and with it, my college days. Shortly after, I had all the contents of my dorm loaded into my aging car, and I headed off to Oklahoma. The drive was long and boring. I couldn't afford to stop for the night, so I continued after dark. It was well after midnight by the time I pulled off the highway onto a dirt road. I followed the road for nearly an hour, and only passed 2 or 3 other farms. With no street lights, my headlights illuminated the road and nearby fields in a pale, washed-out glow that was consumed by darkness mere feet in front of the car. I was beginning to think this was a mistake when I reached the property at the end of the road. My grandfather's farm. My farm. I don't think I've ever been more nervous than I was in that moment. Before my stopped car was the hulking, completely lifeless shape of my new home. It's the same boxy farmhouse style I had seen many times on my journey, only quite larger and better maintained than most. I remember trying to calm my nerves as I exited the car. As I walked to the front porch, the silence of the night was overcome by the noise of thousands of bugs, clicking, chattering, and chirping. It was deafening, and up until that point, I had never experienced such a sound. I reminded myself this was going to take some getting used to. Reaching the front porch and the front door, I was greeted by a lone key and a little note that read, "I'll be by in the morning. Have a good night. Signed, Hartman." Taking the key and note, I unlocked the door and entered. The place was old and rather traditional, but well maintained, and from what I could tell, the furniture and appliances were fairly new and updated. The ground floor of my home has a large entryway, a full bathroom, a spacious living room, a dining room, a kitchen, as well as a smaller office and a home library, all of which I walked through, arriving at the kitchen in the back of the house last. As I entered the kitchen and turned on the lights, I was impressed by how large it was, but more than that, I was taken aback by what I found on one of the walls. Directly across from the fridge and cabinets, a message had been carefully carved into the wall. It read, "Keep your boots on, even in the house. Never go barefoot." At the time, I didn't think much of it. In fact, I think I chuckled and said to myself, "Weird." I suppose I can blame my indifference on exhaustion, because after that, I quickly found the stairs and entered the first bedroom I found. I didn't bother changing my clothes or taking my shoes off. I simply collapsed on the bed and fell asleep. I wanted to sleep in, but the noise of the countryside was nearly as loud as the city sounds I was used to. It seemed to me that the chirping insects were right on the other side of the window or even in the walls. Despite my rude awakening, I chose to make the best of it by getting up and exploring the upstairs. The second floor held 2 more full bathrooms, one of which was attached to the master bedroom. In addition to the master, there were 3 other bedrooms and several storage closets. Checking my phone, I was rather surprised to notice that there was a Wi-Fi network to connect to. I hadn't really expected that here in the middle of nowhere, and to my amazement, it was pretty fast, seemingly faster than the Wi-Fi back in my dorm. Going downstairs, I stood in the living room and took it all in. In that moment, I convinced myself that living in the sticks was a sacrifice worth the home I now had. I couldn't believe it was really mine. Stepping out onto the porch, I marveled at the land that was hidden from view in the dark of night. It was vast and empty. In every direction, it seemed like the land went on for as far as the eye could see, with very little variation. In that moment, I felt completely and utterly alone, as if I were the only human left on Earth, lost in an ocean of wheat. As I stood there in the distance, I noticed a line of dusk rising in the distance and making its way toward my location. "I hope that's just a car," I muttered to myself. It was a car, or rather a truck, a well-maintained silver pickup that parked near the porch. An older man stepped out and headed my way. He wore a white button-down and gray slacks. On his feet were dirty work boots, and on his head was a weathered cowboy hat. He reached out his hand to me. "Timothy, I presume? I'm Hartman. Nice to finally meet you in person." I met his handshake. "Same." "May I come in?" I ushered him in, and he removed his hat when he got inside. "Just wanted to pass off the deed to the place and welcome you to the area," he said as he passed a large envelope to me. "Everything to your liking?" I nodded and said, Yeah, actually better than I expected. I wasn't expecting Wi-Fi here. Oh yeah, I forgot. You probably didn't know much about old Arnold. Nearly a decade ago, he was in a bad farming accident, and they had to amputate his right leg. But Arnold still found ways to be useful and started as an online professor for the local community college. That's why he had the Wi-Fi installed. Really? I had no idea. What did he teach? He thought for a moment. Best I can remember, he was a lecturer on Oklahoma's unique bugs and parasites. Bugs? Mm-hmm. He was something of a local expert on that. I nodded and remembered the words carved into the kitchen wall. Hey, before you leave, maybe you could take a look at something for me. I led him to the kitchen and pointed to the message. Any idea what that means? He stared at it intently for a while, and for a moment, I thought I caught a glance of some dark understanding before he declared, Sorry, not sure. Probably just the ramblings of a man near the end of his life. I wouldn't worry too much about it. I bet the local hardware store could sell you something to cover that up. Then he nodded and headed for the door. I need to be getting back, but you take care. With that, he was gone. I needed supplies. The kitchen was empty. And I had brought very little with me, so I found myself back in the car, heading to town. The nearest town, large enough for a shopping center, was about 45 minutes from my farm, a drive I still haven't gotten used to. The town is home to a well-worn Walmart and a few other smaller stores. For my needs, it's enough. That day, I spent several hours exploring all it had to offer. It was mid-afternoon by the time I decided to head home. I unloaded the car, and upon entering my home with the final load, I shut the door and instinctively removed my shoes. I should have known something was wrong. The floor felt odd. It was warm, almost like stepping on some living creature. With the warmth came a strange sensation on my feet, almost like hundreds of microscopic feet crawling all over the arches of my feet. I looked down, expecting to see a fly or some other insect walking across my foot, but there was nothing. After a few moments, the crawling faded into the familiar pins and needles sensation of a foot falling asleep. A few seconds later, that disappeared too. My feet felt normal, though the floor remained warm. I shrugged, thinking I had nothing to worry about since the strange sensation had passed. I spent the rest of the day watching movies and eating ramen in the living room, before falling asleep on the couch. I don't remember exactly when I woke up, but it was closer to dawn than midnight. I didn't awake because I heard a sound or needed a drink. No, what woke me up was an unbearable itch on the bottom of both of my feet. It was terrible. No matter how much I itched, it wouldn't go away. It was as if the itch was deep beneath my skin, not just on the surface. I itched my feet with my hands, a towel, even a brush, but nothing worked. If anything, the itch seemed to be getting worse. First, it was on the arches of my feet. Then it moved to the pads and even the toes. And soon, my entire foot was inflamed with a deep itch I couldn't reach. I must have sat there scratching my feet for an hour or more. The skin of my feet was red and tender from all my efforts, but the itching continued. Not sure what to do, I hobbled my way up to the shower. Stepping in, I turned on the water, hoping for some relief. Instead, what I got was sudden pain, like thousands of tiny cuts had appeared all over my feet. I screamed and jumped out of the shower. The pain left, but the itching was worse. It continued itching until the sun rose, as daylight filled the room. The itch became dull and eventually disappeared altogether, leaving only a dull tingling in its place. Exhausted, I made my way to the bed I used the first night and fell into a deep sleep. When I woke, it was nearly 3:30. The afternoon shadows grew long and my feet itched again, not as they did before, but a manageable constant itch. I made my way to a chair and examined my feet, which were red and covered in tiny raised mounds. It looked like I had a bad rash. I cautiously touched one of the larger bumps and recoiled my finger instantly. Touching it caused a sharp burst of pain to echo throughout my foot like a vibration in a spider's web. I winced in pain and realized something was seriously wrong. I needed help, but not knowing what to do, I did the only thing I could think of. I opened ChatGPT. My feet are red and itchy, and there are tiny bumps all over that are painful to touch. What should I do? Is what I typed into the chatbot. I still have its response. It said, red, itchy, painful bumps on your feet could have several causes, including irritation, infection, or bites. Avoid scratching. Keep the area clean and dry. If the pain worsens, spreads, or you develop swelling, fever, or trouble walking, seek medical care. For a time, that response calmed my nerves. Perhaps I was having a reaction to something in the air that I had never encountered in the city. Maybe this isn't really a big deal, I thought as I slowly walked down the stairs to the kitchen. There, I lathered my feet in VapoRub before heading to the living room. That evening was fairly normal. For several hours, I had forgotten about the pain in my feet as I sat on the couch watching an old movie. But then I began to notice an alien tingling in my lower legs, right around my ankles. I tried hard to ignore it, but failed when the tingling turned to the deep itching I felt last night. I couldn't bear it, and almost against my will, I found myself hunched over, wildly scratching the skin of my legs. Every few minutes, I'd promised myself I was done scratching. I'd sit on my hands, grit my teeth, and stare at the TV until the itch became unbearable again. Before I realized what I was doing, my fingernails would already be digging into my ankles. I don't know when I noticed, but as I was worried about my legs, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed that the bumps on my feet had grown. They were massive. Some of them were 4 or 5 times the size I remembered. It looked like my feet had been attacked by a swarm of bees. The bumps were swollen and engorged. They stretched the skin like a ripe tomato. Little sidebar here, guys. I think something laid eggs in homie's feet. That's terrifying. Like, I don't know about you, but if I go somewhere, I don't care where it is, if my house, anything, and I see a message scraped into the wall, like clawed into it, I'm going to follow that message. Anyways, let's continue. Cold sweat ran down my forehead, and I could feel adrenaline filling my veins. This was bad. Something was seriously wrong with me. I shambled my way up the stairs to the master bedroom. In the bathroom, I found a pair of tweezers. I sat on the toilet seat, turned on my phone light, and slowly moved the tweezers towards the biggest bump on my right foot. The moment the steel tip of the small tool touched the top of the bump, it moved. I swear it moved. I blinked quickly, hoping it was just a trick of the light. Then I moved the tweezers to touch it again, but this time it moved the opposite way. I clenched my jaw as I realized that there was something alive beneath my skin. I swallowed hard, mustered my courage, and pushed the tweezers down hard on the bump. At this, the bump quickly moved from the top of my foot up my leg past my ankle. The movement was shocking, and I was on the verge of hyperventilating. With a shaking hand, I reached to touch the bump again. The tweezers barely touched the bump when it bolted up my leg, past my knee, past my thigh, and I felt it collide with my hip joint. The suddenness and pain of a ping pong ball sized mass moving up my leg was too much for me, and I passed out. When I came to, I was still on the bathroom floor. I didn't know how long I had been out, but my legs were unrecognizable. My left leg, below the knee, was swollen twice its size and covered with massive greenish-gray orbs. But it was nothing compared to my right leg, which looked more like an elephant's leg, though covered with tennis ball-sized mounds, with a blackish hue. As I moved from side to side, I could hear a squishy, liquid sound coming from the mounds. I panicked. I had to get out of here. I needed a doctor. It took a great bit of effort and pain, but I pulled myself to the staircase. I tried my best to guide myself down the stairs, but ended up losing control and tumbled to the bottom. At the bottom, I tried to make it to the door, but a sharp pain in my right leg stopped me. I screamed and looked at my leg. It was vibrating violently, and after a moment, a loud squelching pop and splatter of hot, purulent fluid silenced my movement. I wiped the fluid off my face and looked down at the leg. Wherever a bump had been was now a black, bloody hole. My leg looked like a log attacked by a dozen woodpeckers. Not 1 inch of my skin was without a hole. As I looked at the myriad of holes, I felt vomit rising in my throat as I noticed something thin push through one of the holes, slick with blood. It writhed blindly across my skin before another followed, and another. Long, pitch-black worms poured from my leg. With fumbling hands, I pulled my phone from my pocket and dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? Help me, please help me, I screamed as a long, thin worm crawled up the back of my hand. It felt cold on my skin. Again, darkness closed in and I lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in the hospital, and I didn't take it well. I screamed and thrashed around in bed. It didn't take long for the doctors to rush in and restrain me. After I calmed down, a tall, well-kept doctor came in. Good afternoon, Timothy. How are you feeling now? Better, I replied weakly. Good, he nodded. You've suffered a severe parasite infestation. Unfortunately, we haven't yet identified the parasite. Nothing we removed matches any known parasite, but I'm quite certain that we have successfully removed all of them from your body. He gently removed the blanket from my lower half. As he did, I looked down and gasped. I'm sorry to say that we had to remove your right leg. It was the only way to ensure that the infestation did not spread. He drew my attention over to my left leg. Thankfully, your left leg wasn't nearly as serious, and we were able to stop the parasites by just removing certain sections of your leg. I stared at my new, quote-unquote, leg, which looked like they took a massive cheese grater to the flesh of my leg and shaved off the layers until they stopped just short of my leg bone. Several of my colleagues are hopefully optimistic that you'll regain movement in your leg, he said with a half smile. I'm writing this from a hotel room 3 states away. I abandoned everything I owned at that farm. The sheriff can keep the property for all I care. I was released from the hospital almost a week ago after they held me for 2, and there was no way I would ever go back to my farm. I wanted to write this all down before things get worse. I first felt the tingle in my right hand 2 days ago, and yesterday the unstoppable itch began. As I type this, I have to stop every few sentences to scratch my hand. The bumps haven't appeared yet, but I know they will. I'm gonna stop it before it grows. I hope my knife is sharp enough, and I hope this will stop the spread. You know, it's not very often on this channel that I say a story was genuinely terrifying, and this one, more so than just being terrifying, gave me the ick. So, no cardiologist, if you're watching this video, your story is the first ever to give me the ick that I've read on this channel, but great writing. I loved it. And yeah, Grandpa didn't have a farming accident. His leg got infested by alien bugs. The next story we're going to read today is also from r/nosleep from user DigiSean1163. I lost on a popular game show and I'll be regretting it for the rest of my life. This is a PSA for anyone trying to get on that game show. It's also a cry for help. I'm not going to say which one because if I do, I'm afraid they'll see this post and find me. I'll just say it's the one where you and 2 other people answer tough questions with a host, and critically, if you get the answer wrong, you can go into the negative. That's what happened to me on Friday. I can still remember my sweat-slippery hands sliding on the buzzer only halfway into the first round. Jane Austen? I said, unsure. Oh, sorry, Jack, incorrect again, the chipper host said. His big smile not quite matching the moment as he adjusted his tie and my score dropped even further. I was trying to climb myself out of a hole I was busy digging myself into. At the moment, that hole was $3,000. I'd been a fan of the show for a long time, but I'd never seen anyone drop this far. I thought the worst part would be the embarrassment of watching myself lose horribly on national TV. I couldn't have been more wrong. Another heart-pounding round of questions later, negative $3,200, negative $3,800, I decided to stop buzzing in. Not looking good, Jack, the host said, making his customary round of small talk with the contestants. Yeah, I guess I'm a little nervous. The other contestants didn't even look at me. They just stared straight ahead. Maybe too embarrassed for me? They were stone-like. You should be, he slapped me on the shoulder. I flinched. I'd never seen him talk to a contestant like this before. Oh, I'm just kidding. He moved on to the next contestant, shaking the sweat off his hand that he had picked up from my jacket. I could feel my cheeks flush. It was so hot in here. 10 minutes into the next round, and I had started to regain my composure. Standing completely still and not saying anything will do that to you. Next question. What is the battle known by the Lakota as greasy grass? Silence. Nobody knew. Jack? He wasn't supposed to do that, was he? Call on someone? I wasn't sure if all the lights had turned on me, but that's what it felt like. I don't know. The audience gasped. The host smiled. His eyes started to get wide. Are you sure? You'll be kicking yourself. He was leaning over his podium. I don't want to lose any more money. I'm not guessing. Little Bighorn. It's Little Bighorn, Jack. Was that Custer's last stand? I asked, not realizing I was speaking aloud. I knew you'd know it. My score dropped another 500. Jesus, when would this be over? This part? Soon enough, Jack. The host shot me air pistols. Did I say that out loud? What did he mean by this part? Final question. Place your bets. I'm sorry, Jack. You won't be joining us for this one. What a relief. I stepped away from the podium into a backstage holding area. 5 minutes later, I heard applause. I sat up, ready to get back on stage and be a good sport. Then the host appeared in the doorway of the waiting room. Hi, Jack. Hi, I said as flatly as I could. Not our best performance. No, I guess not. Hey, shouldn't I be out there? I asked, moving closer to the door. He stepped forward. Not until you pay us back. Pay you back? You were over 4,000 in the hole. What do you think? We just let our contestants go without settling up? It's only fair. I stepped backwards. The host stepped forward again. This is how it goes, Jack. The part you don't get to see on TV. I fell back onto the couch. It was soft, and I sunk into it. I wish I could have sunk further and further until I wasn't in the room anymore. The host loomed over me. Jack, his voice feigning sympathy. We can do this the easy way or the hard way. Are you crazy? This can't be happening. Oh, it can, and it is. He started to shuffle around in his pocket. Was he pulling something out? Fine, okay, I'll pay. That big, toothy grin curled back into being on his face. Can I Venmo you? The host's smile curdled. Cash. Who keeps that kind of money in their pocket? I yelled, not really asking. Then you'll have to bring it back next time. Don't forget, we do collect interest. I'll just call the police when I get home, I thought. I wouldn't do that. Are you reading my mind? I can do a lot of things, Jack. The whole room got dark. All I could see were his big eyes and his even bigger smile. All I could feel was his tie drooping onto my chest. He was so close. His breath, surprisingly cold, fogged my glasses. Fine, I will. I promise. I'll be back next week. The room brightened up again. Good, but just in case. He pulled out a wrench, and my vision blurred. It's been 2 days. I'm typing this with my left hand. How am I going to get $4,300? This story feels like it could be a bad dream. Specifically one where you fell asleep watching Jeopardy! The next one's from r/no-sleep from user hotconcentrate4763. My bedridden husband can't move, so why did I just find a shattered phone on his floor? Please help. I don't even know where to start, but I need advice right now because I feel like I'm completely losing my mind. I'm watching Mark sleep on the baby monitor while I type this. For 3 long years, my life has been reduced to the 4 walls of this room. Mark used to be a 6'2" construction foreman, but a drunk driver changed all that in a fraction of a second. Now he's just a silent, uncooperative weight, paralyzed from the neck down. He can't feed himself. He can't hold my hand. He can't even roll over to stop the bed sores unless I physically haul his heavy body onto his side. My wrists ache constantly. My back is completely ruined. Being a full-time caregiver is a special kind of hell, but I do it because I love him. Every single morning is identical. 6 a.m. The sharp metallic buzz of my phone alarm goes off, shocking the soles of my feet against the cold hardwood floor. I forced down 4 cups of lukewarm, bitter black coffee just to function. When I walk into his bedroom, the air always hits me like a wall. Heavy, humid, smelling of old sweat, sour skin, and wool blankets. The smell of bleach never truly leaves this house, but it can't cover up the scent of sickness. I roll him over, listening to the sickening, wet slide of his skin against the plastic undersheets. His joints give a dull, hollow pop with every shift. Then comes the kitchen routine. The dry, grating screech of the mortar and pestle sets my teeth on edge as I grind his pills into a fine, chalky powder. Muscle relaxants, nerve blockers, and a heavy liquid sedative to stop his involuntary spasms. I mix it into a thick, grayish-beige nutrient slurry that smells faintly of metallic vitamins, adding the clear, viscous drops of the sedative until it dissolves. I spoon-feed him slowly, the metal clicking sharply against his teeth, using a rough washcloth to wipe away the sticky stirring of drool on his stubble. Usually his eyes are dead. He just stares blankly at the ceiling fan spinning overhead. But over the last 2 weeks, something shifted. The moment the door hinges give a tiny rusted squeak, Mark's eyes instantly snap to mine. They aren't blank anymore. They're wide, bloodshot, and frantic. The pupils dilate so violently they swallow his irises. Yesterday, when I brought the spoon to his lips, a single hot tear sliced through the grease on his cheek. His jaw locked tightly shut with a sickening click of bone. I had to pinch his nose and pry his mouth open, breathing in the sour tang of his breath, just to make sure he swallowed his medicine. I told his doctor, but she thinks it's just late-onset depression and medical trauma. I don't think so. The house feels wrong. Yesterday, I found a damp patch on the hallway carpet that smelled like rain. Last night, I heard a floorboard groan in the living room while I was bathing him. But at 3:15 a.m. last night, things got so much worse. A sound woke me up that scraped right along my spine. It was a rhythmic, dull thudding coming from his room. Thump, thump, thump. Like a heavy sack of flour being dropped on the floorboards. I grabbed my heavy iron flashlight, the cold metal freezing my palms, and crept down the pitch-black hallway. I pushed his bedroom door open. The rusted hinges gave a high, piercing whine. The room was freezing. The window was shut, but the air felt dead and hollow. Mark was asleep, his chest rising and falling in the slow, mechanical rhythm of the sedative. But his phone, the old, deactivated smartphone I keep on his nightstand just to play ambient rain sounds to drown out the click hiss of his oxygen machine, was lying on the floor. It was 3 feet away from the table, face down on the hard wood. Its screen shattered into a spiderweb of glinting, sharp fractures. There's no draft in this house strong enough to blow a heavy phone off a nightstand, and Mark physically cannot move. I didn't go back to sleep. I sat at the kitchen table, watching the gray dawn bleed into the room until the shadows on the linoleum dissolved. My mind kept looping back to that shattered glass. I tried to build a rational explanation, piece by piece, the way you try to balance an unstable house of cards. Maybe the vibration of the rain app had slowly drifted the phone to the edge? Maybe a stray mouse? But deep down, in that quiet, visceral place where your instincts live, I knew that was a lie. The phone had been placed in the exact center of the oak nightstand, nestled in a carved groove. It hadn't drifted, it had been pushed. At 7 a.m., I walked back into Mark's room, my slippers dragging heavily. He was still under the deep, suffocating fog of the emergency sedative. His breath came in thin, whistling gaps that rattled the back of his throat. A dry, papery sound that always reminded me of dead leaves scraping against asphalt. His skin looked translucent in the morning light, mapped with thin, branching rivers of blue and purple veins. I stood over him for a long time, the heavy iron flashlight still gripped tightly in my right hand. My knuckles were white. "Did you do it?" I whispered into the quiet room. The only response was the mechanical, rhythmic click hiss of the oxygen machine. I felt a sudden, sickening wave of shame wash over me. How could I even think that? The man hadn't felt his own toes in 36 months. His spine was a shattered mess of scar tissue and wire. I was letting the sleep deprivation eat holes in my sanity. I set the flashlight down with a heavy metallic thunk and went to work. His right hand was still stained with the dried, dark brown crust of the blood from yesterday's frantic scraping. I fetched a plastic basin of warm water and a soft yellow sponge. When I dipped his hand into the water, the liquid instantly swirled with a rusty amber tint. I worked gently, dabbing at the raw, weeping skin over his knuckles. His fingers were stiff, curled inward like the claws of a dead bird. As I wiped away the last of the crust, my fingers brushed against the pad of his index finger. The skin there wasn't soft, like the rest of his unused bedbound body. It was rough. There was a tiny localized patch of hard, callous skin right at the tip, the kind you get from repetitive, friction-heavy pressure, like someone rubbing their finger against a coarse surface for hours at a time. My heart gave a hard, erratic thud against my ribs. I dropped the sponge back into the basin. It hit the surface with a loud, wet splash, slopping soapy, pinkish water over the rim and onto the hardwood floor. I stared at his face. His eyelids gave a sudden, violent twitch, his chest heaving as the medication began to lose its grip on his nervous system. "Mark?" I breathed, leaning down until the sour heat of his breath fanned against my cheek. His eyes snapped open. There was no gradual waking up, no soft blinking away of sleep. It was an instantaneous electric jolt. The pupils were already fully dilated, pitch-black pools that seemed to swallow the gray morning light. He didn't look at the ceiling fan. He didn't look at the window. He looked directly into my eyes, and the sheer, unadulterated hatred burning in his gaze froze the blood in my veins. His jaw began to work, his lips stretching back over his dry, yellowing teeth with a faint, wet, tearing sound. A thick line of white, foamy saliva bubbled at the corner of his mouth. He was trying to form a word. His throat clicked, a dry, raspy rattle vibrating deep in his neck. He wheezed out something that sounded like it started with W, barely louder than the rustle of paper. I leaned closer, my ears inches from his lips, entirely forgetting my fear in a sudden, desperate surge of hope. "What is it, sweetheart? Tell me. What do you need?" "Why?" He stopped, a violent, full-body shudder ripping through his frame. His heels dug into the mattress under the heavy wool blankets, a sudden, frantic kicking motion that lasted for 2 terrible seconds before his legs went entirely limp again. His chest heaved as he fought for air, his teeth snapping shut with a sharp, sickening crack that echoed in the small room. He didn't finish the word, but he didn't need to. I backed away from the bed, my hands pressed hard against my mouth to stifle a sob. The sheer, feral panic in his eyes wasn't the look of a man suffering from depression. It was the look of a prey animal staring at the thing that was going to eat it. I needed to leave. I needed to get out of the house, just for an hour, to clear the fog out of my brain and breathe air that didn't smell like sickness and bleach. "I'm going to the store, Mark," I said, my voice sounding hollow and fake, even to my own ears. "I'm going to get some more of your liquid formula. I'll be right back." He didn't blink. He just watched me move toward the door, his eyes tracking my every step with a cold, unblinking density that made the hairs on my arms stand up. I grabbed my car keys from the kitchen counter, the metal jingling loudly in the quiet house. I walked out the front door, slamming it shut behind me, and locked it with a heavy, definitive click. I walked down the porch steps, my boots crunching loudly on the gravel driveway, and got into my sedan. I started the engine, letting the loud, mechanical rumble fill the quiet suburban air. But I didn't put the car in drive. Instead, I sat there, watching the exhaust smoke curl up into the cold morning air in my rearview mirror. A terrible, dark thought had taken root in my mind, a poisonous little seed that I couldn't tear out. He thinks I'm gone. I turned off the ignition. The sudden silence wrapped around the car like a heavy blanket. I got out quietly, closing the car door using only the tip of my finger, until the latch clicked shut without a sound. I crept back up the wooden porch steps, avoiding the third step because I knew it gave a loud, structural groan when weight was applied. I unlocked the front door with agonizing slowness, turning the key millimeter by millimeter until the bolt slid back without a whisper. I stepped inside the hallway. The house felt entirely different now. Heavy, expectant, and freezing cold. I took off my boots, standing in my wool socks, and began to creep down the dark hallway toward Mark's room, my heart hammering so violently against my ribs I was certain he would hear it. I reached the edge of his door frame. The door was cracked open just an inch, a sliver of gray light cutting across the dark hardwood of the hall. I leaned forward, pressing my eye to the gap. Through that narrow, 1-inch gap in the doorway, the world seemed to shrink down to the sharp, mechanical clink hiss of the oxygen concentrator. I held my breath, the back of my throat burning with the taste of copper and swallowed panic. At first, nothing happened. Mark lay perfectly still under the heavy, dark wool blanket. The room was a tableau of static, gray misery. Then the blanket shifted. It wasn't a sudden jerk or a violent spasm. It was a slow, agonizingly deliberate swell, like something buried alive trying to reshape its shroud. From beneath the edge of the fabric, his right arm began to emerge. My breath caught in my teeth. The movement was horrific because of how much effort it took. The muscles in his forearm were completely wasted away, the skin hanging loose and gray against the bone, but it was lifting. It rose, millimeter by millimeter, trembling so violently that I could hear the dry friction of his skin dragging against the plastic undersheet. It sounded like paper tearing in slow motion. His hand rose into the cold air of the bedroom. His fingers, those stiff, yellowed claws with the raw, calloused index pad, were flexing. They opened and closed, tasting the air, before reaching out toward the side of the mattress. He wasn't reaching for the shattered phone on the floor. He was reaching down, forcing his arm over the sharp edge of the wooden bed frame, his knuckles scraping against the grain until a fresh bead of dark blood welled up on his skin. He didn't even flinch. His face, visible in the sliver of gray light, was a mask of pure, agonizing concentration. His teeth were bared, stringy strings of saliva stretching between his lips as his fingers dug blindly into the narrow gap between the heavy box spring and the mattress. He was searching for something. I couldn't look anymore. The reality of what I was seeing smashed through my brain like a physical blow. He wasn't paralyzed, not completely. He had been gaining movement back, practicing in the dark hours while I slept, hiding it from the doctors, hiding it from me. I pushed the door open. The rusted hinges didn't just squeak. They let out a sharp, metallic scream that pierced the quiet of the house. Mark's reaction was instantaneous. The sheer electric terror that flooded his face matched my own. His arm dropped like a stone, slamming against the wooden frame before disappearing beneath the blanket. He closed his eyes tightly, forcing his breath to go shallow and ragged, trying to mimic the heavy, dead weight of the sedative. But it was too late. The illusion was shattered. I didn't say a word. I didn't cry. A strange, freezing calm washed over me, the kind of numbness that comes when you're in a car crash and everything slows down to a crawl. I walked into the room, my wool socks making no sound on the floorboards. Mark lay there, his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling in a fake, rhythmic pattern. But he was trembling. The wool blanket was vibrating with the frantic beat of his heart. I stopped at the edge of the bed. I leaned down, my face inches away from his, and whispered, "I saw you, Mark." His eyes snapped open. The pretense was gone. The raw, feral hatred was back, but beneath it was a desperate, whimpering panic. I reached down to the exact spot where his fingers had been clawing. I shoved my hand into the dark, tight space between the mattress and the box spring. My knuckles brushed against something cold and smooth. Plastic. I pulled it out. It was a cheap, black burner smartphone, the kind you buy at a gas station for $20. The screen was smudged with oily fingerprints and the faint red smear of his own blood from his raw knuckles. My hand shook so violently I almost dropped it. I pressed the power button. The screen illuminated the dim room with a harsh blue glare. There were no apps installed, no games, no social media. There was only the messaging interface. I opened the drafts folder, my thumb hovering over the glass. There were dozens of them. Dozens of messages, all addressed to emergency services, written over the span of months. They were typed in frantic, messy blocks of text, full of typos and missing spaces where his calloused, uncooperative finger had missed the keys. I started reading them, the words blurring before my eyes as the cold truth finally settled into my chest. I stared at the glowing blue screen, my thumb scrolling through the drafts. My mind couldn't make sense of the words at first. They looked like code. They looked like a language I didn't speak. The oldest draft was from 6 months ago. Help me. I'm not sick anymore. My legs work. She won't let me out of the room. I blinked. The text blurred. I scrolled to the next one, dated 3 months later. Tried to walk to the kitchen last night to get water. She woke up. She screamed at me like I was a ghost. She hit me with the flashlight and forced the syringe into my mouth. Please, someone check the house on Elm Street. I am a prisoner. My breath hitched. The words felt heavy, like lead pressing down on my chest. Elm Street? We didn't live on Elm Street. We lived in our beautiful, quiet suburban home. I looked up at Mark. He was staring at me, his eyes wide and leaking silent tears into his stubble. His jaw wasn't locked in a medical spasm. It was trembling with sheer, unadulterated terror. I looked back down at the phone. The most recent draft was from last night, typed right before he dropped the device onto the floorboards. She thinks it's 3 years ago. She thinks the accident just happened. The doctor told her last year that my spine healed, but her brain snapped from the stress. Every time I try to stand up, she thinks an intruder is breaking in. She drugs me back into paralysis. If I don't get out today, the sedatives are going to stop my heart. Please. The phone slipped from my hand. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp plastic clatter, the screen flickering once before going dark. The click hiss of the oxygen concentrator suddenly sounded incredibly loud, echoing in the corners of the room. I looked around. The walls weren't white anymore. They were covered in layers of peeling, yellowed wallpaper. The medical equipment in the corner was dusty, unplugged, and rusted. I looked down at my hands. They were stained with gray, chalky residue of the pills I ground up every single morning. The mortar and pestle sat on the nightstand, surrounded by dozens of empty prescription bottles with Mark's name on them, all prescribed over a year ago, all expired. Mark, I whispered, my voice sounding incredibly small, like a little girl lost in a dark forest. Sweetheart, your breakfast is getting cold. He didn't answer. He couldn't. His eyelids were already fluttering, drifting shut as the massive emergency dose of the sedative I had forced down his throat minutes ago finally took hold of his central nervous system. His wasted arm, the one he had worked so hard for months to rehabilitate in the dark, slipped off the mattress and hung limply toward the floor, his calloused index finger brushing the wood. I stood there in the freezing room for a long time, watching his chest rise and fall. Rise, fall, rise, fall. Slow, rhythmic, completely safe. A wave of intense, beautiful relief washed over me, clearing away all the panic and the paranoia of the last 2 weeks. The house felt quiet again. The stalker was gone. The intruder hadn't broken in after all. Mark was right here, right where he belonged, entirely safe under the heavy wool blankets where nothing could ever hurt him again. I walked out of the room, closing the door until the rusted hinges gave a soft, familiar squeak. I headed down the hall to the kitchen to start a fresh pot of coffee. It's almost 6 a.m. and I need to be ready. Tomorrow is a big day. I have to wake up early to take care of my husband. Oh my gosh. So I had a feeling that something was up with Mark. I thought there was going to be something evil about him and maybe he was never actually paralyzed or something like that. No, he's not paralyzed anymore. His wife just snapped. So I'm by no means a doctor or a nurse or anything like that, but there are long-acting paralytics that people use in the healthcare setting that completely make it like to where you'll be awake in your head, but you can't move. You can't move a muscle. If you do, it is all involuntary. And the idea of someone chemically restraining you and you're a prisoner, like I'd much rather be a prisoner inside of a cell in somebody's basement or, some other thing that's happened in other stories that I've read. But to be a prisoner in your own body and your wife is the prison warden, that's terrible. Anyways, I've got one more story for you guys today. Let's go ahead and get into it. It's from r/NoSleep from user iShusharama. My dad told me not to go outside that night. He never explained why. Jason, don't talk about this much. My wife knows the short version. My buddies from high school know there's a version of this story, but I've never actually told it start to finish. Not even to my dad, and he was there for the worst part of it. I grew up on a corn and soybean farm about 40 minutes outside Cedar Falls, Iowa, on a stretch of county road that doesn't even show up right on the GPS half the time. Our closest neighbor, the Hendricksons, was almost 3 miles down the road. My mom died of ovarian cancer when I was 12, so from then on, it was just me and my dad in that farmhouse. He worked the fields, I went to school, and in the fall, I rode my bike to football practice because he was usually out working until dark and couldn't drive me. I'm telling you all this because I need you to understand that being alone outside at night wasn't unusual for me. I did it all the time. I biked 2 miles home from practice in the pitch dark more times than I can count. It never bothered me. My dad never once told me not to. Until that one night in September of my sophomore year. I remember it was late September because we'd just finished the second cutting on the hay and the beans were still green, not ready for harvest yet. I got home from practice around 8, put my bike in the shed like always, and when I walked in the house, my dad was just standing in the kitchen, instead of sitting at the table like usual. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there. He said, "Don't go outside tonight, not even to the shed, not even for your bike. I mean it." I asked him why. He just said, "Just don't." His voice wasn't angry, it was flat in a way I'd never heard from him. My dad was not a nervous guy. He'd worked that land his whole life. Dealt with coyotes getting into the chicken coop, dealt with tornado warnings, dealt with burying his own wife. Nothing rattled him. So when he told me that and wouldn't explain it, it stuck with me more than if he'd yelled. I didn't push it. I ate dinner, did some homework, and around 11 I couldn't sleep, so I got up for a glass of water. My room faced the back of the house, towards the fields. We had 4 sodium floodlights on poles out there, the kind that buzz a little and throw this orange-yellow light in patches. My dad kept them on at night because we'd been having trouble with deer, and that summer, something that had been getting into the grain bins that he never did identify. I looked out my window like I always did, not thinking about anything, and that's when I saw someone standing in the field. It was maybe 400 yards out, past the second light pole, in one of those gaps where the light barely reached. Most of the bean field was just black, but there was this one patch, lit orange from the pole, and there was a person standing dead center in it, not moving. I want to be clear about something. From that distance, at night, under sodium light, you can't see color right. Sodium lights wash everything into this orange-brown, but this person looked wrong, even accounting for that. The color on them wasn't just orange from the light. It was darker in patches, almost rust-colored, like something had dried on their skin or their clothes. I remember thinking it looked like they'd been out in the mud, or maybe it was just work coveralls stained up from field work, which honestly wouldn't have been that strange around here. I watched for probably a full minute, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe Hendrickson's boy was messing around. Maybe some hunter who'd wandered onto our land, which happened sometimes, even though we didn't allow it. Then the figure lifted one arm, slow, and waved me toward it. Not a big wave, just one motion. Arm up, hand open. And then it went still again. It didn't call out. It didn't move any closer. It just stood there after that, like it was waiting to see what I'd do. I know how this sounds. I know the smart thing was to wake my dad up right then, but I was 15 and told myself it might be somebody who actually needed help. Maybe somebody's car broke down on the county road. I didn't let myself think too hard about the alternative. I put on my shoes and went out the back door quiet, not through the front door where my dad might hear the screen door. The night was still warm, that late September Iowa warm where the air feels even thicker after dark. I could hear crickets, and somewhere off toward the Hendricksons, a dog barking at something, on and off. My legs felt fine walking the first 100 yards or so, right up until I got past our old grain bin and the ground dipped down into the field proper, and then I started sweating in a way that had nothing to do with the temperature. The bean rows are only about knee-high that time of year, so I could see over them fine. But once I got in among them, the sound changed completely. Up by the house, the wind moving through the beans just sounds like wind. Once you're inside it, walking through it, every gust sounds like something is moving through the rows near you, and not always in the direction the wind is actually blowing. I kept stopping because I'd hear a rustle off to my left, and then a second later one off to my right, closer than it should have been able to get that fast. I told myself it was rabbits. We had plenty of rabbits in that field. I still tell myself that. I lost sight of the figure for a stretch because I dropped into a low part of the field, and when I came back up, I couldn't find the patch of light I'd been walking toward. Everything looked the same in every direction. 4 floodlights all throwing the same orange glow into different empty rows. And for a second, I genuinely didn't know which way the house was behind me. I kept walking anyway. I don't know why. My legs just carried me forward like they'd already decided something my head hadn't agreed to yet. And then, without me really understanding how, I was standing right where the figure had been. There was nobody there, just an empty patch of bean rows and one of those strange circular flattened spots in the dirt, like the plants had been pressed down and stayed that way. The hair-thin stalks around the edge of it were bent and snapped in a way that didn't look like wind damage or deer damage. It looked broken by hand, almost deliberate, like something had pushed the stalks down one at a time instead of trampling through. My eyes started to go strange on me right about then. Not blurry like I was going to cry, more like the edges of everything got soft. The way things look right before you fall asleep sitting up. I remember thinking that was wrong, that I should be more scared than I was, and not being able to make myself feel it the way I should have. That's when a hand landed on my shoulder from behind, like it was trying to pull me backward. I spun around fast, and my dad was standing there. The second I saw his flashlight beam swing across my face, it was like something let go of me. I came back to myself all at once, the way you do when you wake up out of a dream you didn't know you were having. He didn't yell. He grabbed my hand and held it so tight it actually hurt. I remember that more than almost anything else from that night, because my dad never grabbed me like that, not once in my life, not even when I was little and about to run into the road. He didn't say much, just told me, quiet, that he told me not to come out here. I looked back toward that flattened circle before he pulled me away. There was a strange stone sitting right in the middle of it, wedged down between the broken stalks. It was smooth, almost polished, like something you'd find in a riverbed. Except we don't have a river anywhere near that field. Never have. It was dark red, and the red wasn't just on the stone. It looked more like it had bled out a little around the edges into the dirt, like the color belonged to more than just the rock itself. I bent down without really thinking about it, reaching for the stone, and my dad yanked my hand back so hard I nearly lost my footing. He didn't explain. He just started walking straight toward the house. Fast, not looking left or right, not looking behind us even once. I kept feeling like something was moving along behind us in the dark, staying just far enough back that I couldn't be sure, and I think Dad felt it too. Because he didn't slow down until we were through the back door and he'd thrown the deadbolt. Once we were inside, I asked him what that was. He told me again in that same heavy voice that he said not to go out there. He wasn't angry. I could hear something else in it, something closer to fear. Like he was more scared of what almost happened to me than he ever was of what was actually out there. I asked him 2 or 3 more times over the next few days. He never gave me a real answer. That night, neither of us slept. I know because I could hear him in the kitchen at 2 in the morning and again at 4. I'd never heard him up like that, not even the week my mom died. The next morning, walking to catch the bus, I ran into Mr. Hendrickson at the end of our driveway. He didn't waste time on hello. He just asked me straight out why there had been screaming coming from our place the night before. I told him it was probably an animal. I could see in his face that he didn't believe that for a second, but he didn't push it either. A few days after that, maybe 3, I don't remember exactly, I woke up early and heard my dad's voice out by the gate, talking to someone I didn't recognize. He was telling the man he wanted to sell the property, all of it, the house and the land both. He didn't want me hearing it because the second I stepped outside, he stopped talking mid-sentence. I asked him about it later that day. First, he told me I shouldn't be listening in on his conversations. Then, after a while, he said it different. Said something like we couldn't keep running the place by ourselves anymore, and that whatever we got for the land, we'd move into town, maybe get a little shop, somewhere easier. I didn't ask any more questions after that. It felt like there was a reason under the reason, and I think some part of me already understood he didn't want to say it out loud. Maybe he didn't want to lose me the way he almost had that night. We moved into town before the year was out. He's 65 now. I don't bring up that night with him anymore because the last few times I tried, he just says he doesn't remember it clearly. I know that's not true. I never believe that's true. I still wonder what that was, standing out there in the light. I wonder if my father saw it too, the same way I did, or if he only knew enough to be afraid of it. And I wonder, more than anything, what would have happened if I'd picked up that stone before he got to me, or if he'd been 30 seconds slower walking out that back door. Some nights, it still gets to me, thinking about it. I don't have an answer. I don't think I ever will. Dang, what a good one to end it on, not knowing the reason. Okay, so we got a he who shall not be named situation going on here. Or I guess a possible it who shall not be named. There's a couple comments on here. The first one says maybe the figure in the field was his dad. I don't know. Saying like his dad is some like weird entity, or maybe his dad was holding some sacrifice ritual out in the fields to like get the crops to grow. I mean, that could make sense. But I'm going to go with it was some type of soul-eating entity. The first story today is from r/no-sleep from user Unalloyed Saint Trina. 30 years ago, my coworker was dying, and I could have saved him. I didn't. I've been cursed ever since. Today marks the anniversary of Mickey's death, and I can't hold it all inside anymore. I need to come clean, not just about what happened that night, but about everything. Every unconfessed mistake and every bitter failure. That's why it's tormenting me after all. The shape in the sky is drawn to my guilt. Every night it's there, hovering past my bedroom window or swirling in the darkness above the treetops, begging me to acknowledge the heartless shit I've done. And finally, here I am. I'm ready to confess. Fresh out of high school, I scrapped my college plans and got hired as a night security guard. The job didn't pay well, and it certainly didn't make my parents proud, but it was low stress, and that's all I cared about. There was never any trouble. What sane person would leave a warm bed to break into a rubber factory? Mickey, a burly Irishman about 10 years my senior, onboarded me. For how much time we spent together, it was astonishing how little we knew about each other. The man wasn't a born conversationalist. If he hadn't come back from his honeymoon with a vicious lobster red sunburn, I doubt he would have told me about the wedding. Honestly, I was happy with the professional distance. Mickey was a laid-back guy who didn't expect much from me. No expectations meant no pressure. God knows I don't work well under pressure. Our last night together was certainly no exception. It was after midnight. We were doing our rounds, strolling through the dimly lit parking lot. Mickey was lagging a few feet behind me, chowing down on an oversized gas station hoagie. Crickets chirped in the pines that surrounded the factory. There was a sudden clack. The hazy beam from his flashlight stopped bobbing along the asphalt. It took me a few seconds to realize something was wrong. I turned around. He was wobbling in place, clawing at his neck and chest, skin paler than the moon, lips tinted this nightmarish blue-gray. The half-eaten sandwich lay scattered at his feet. He was choking. I knew he was choking, and I'd been taught what to do. Get behind him, wrap my arms around his belly, and thrust. Just as I was about to help, a familiar dread began crawling across my skin, and my brain erupted with fitful static. The specter of doubt was creeping in. Was I sure I knew what to do? What if I made a mistake? Should I thrust in and up, or just in? Did I remember all the steps? Was I supposed to reach into his mouth and try to remove the blockage first? And while those asinine questions left me paralyzed, I just stared at the dying man. Fear was making a mess of his face. Bulging eyes, sharp creases, quiet, contorted terror. The light left him. His body hit the asphalt with a rich, splintering thud. I didn't move. Couldn't tell you exactly how much time passed. It was more than enough to save him, I know that much. Eventually, autopilot kicked in. My legs started dragging me towards the factory. By the time my mind caught up to my muscles, I was already inside, dialing 911 on the break room's rotary telephone. The dispatcher claimed we were lucky. An ambulance happened to be passing by our otherwise remote location at that very moment. As I sprinted back outside, I told myself everything was going to be okay. Mickey and I were the only people here. The cameras shouldn't have recorded his death. We'd been too far from the building when he started choking. I could sell them any story I wanted to. No one had to know how badly I messed up. Red lights flickered on the horizon. I was so captivated by relief that I nearly tripped over his corpse, looking down with just enough time to skid to a stop. That's when I noticed something. Something on his wrist was glinting against the approaching light. I bent over. It was the silver strap of some cheap watch. Tiny flecks of glass were scattered around where the watch face had been pulverized between his wrist and the asphalt. I perked my ears. I heard a distant siren, but no ticking. No, 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 I whispered, furiously rotating the strap. The broken watch read 12:31 a.m., Mickey's time of death immortalized. I checked my own watch. My heart plummeted. 1:22 a.m. I could practically hear the police officer asking, "What kind of person waits a whole 50 minutes before phoning for help?" The wailing of the sirens grew louder. The flashing lights were closing in. Instinct took over. I ripped the watch from his wrist and shoved it into my pocket. The ambulance screeched to a halt. EMS leaped from the vehicle, asking what happened as they attempted to resuscitate the long-dead Mickey, and I played my part. I told them he choked and that I'd done everything I could. They lifted the cadaver onto a gurney, carted him into the waiting ambulance, and sped away. A few seconds later, I bolted to my car. I rolled down the windows and floored the accelerator. Wind tore through the vehicle as I shot onto the interstate, cold air stinging me awake. I weighed my options. I could bury the watch, or keep it, or toss it into one of Missouri's endless landfills. In the end, though, I knew exactly where it belonged. It belonged at the bottom of the reservoir my grandpa had built behind his mansion, with all the other broken things. Years had passed since I'd last stepped foot on the property. I parked along a ditch. A single paved footpath connected the dirt road to the boarded-up estate. Painful energy seemed to radiate from the dilapidated structure. Felt like I had a migraine coming on as I walked along the edge of the property, navigating the cluttered mass of pines and white oaks until I reached a clearing and the musty stench of decaying algae confirmed I'd arrived. I lit a cigarette and sucked in some thick gulps of smoke, trying to repress the old fear bubbling beneath my skin. In my family, I've always been the odd one out, the run of the litter. My older brother is a Nobel laureate. My twin sister is an Olympian. Both my parents were successful lawyers, and my grandpa earned a Purple Heart in Vietnam. And I'm just me. Not dumb, but chronically scatterbrained. Not weak, but incredibly clumsy. And anxious. God, I was anxious about everything as a kid. Put it all together, and the diagnosis became clear. I was defective. My parents figured if anyone could fix me, it'd be Grandpa, the familial patriarch, the so-called perfect man, the one who'd made our fortune from nothing. I spent most summers at Grandpa's estate. They were nothing short of hell, but you want to know the real messed up part? I can feel the toll those summers took on me, but I don't remember most of them. They were physical drills, mental exercises, prayer, hikes that seemed to take weeks to complete. But the specifics of all that? Couldn't tell you. The memories are a hazy, soupy mess. The only events I remember with clarity were the punishment ceremonies. You see, if I ever made a mistake, the parameters of which were subjectively defined by Grandpa, I'd be taken out to the reservoir after sunset. He'd hand me something I loved, a toy, an item of clothing, a framed picture. Then he'd command that I make amends. Each mistake is a debt, Lucas, a debt to ourselves and to the gracious heart of the universe. It's time to pay up. A broken offering to counterbalance what you broke today. I'd snap the toy, tear at the clothing, crush the frame beneath my bare foot. Then I'd throw it into the reservoir and watch that tiny piece of me sink. All the while, Grandpa would be on his knees, shaking clasped hands at the sky, earnestly begging something for forgiveness. I always assumed he was pleading with God. Between furious bouts of Vietnamese, he'd repeat the words, "no hell," in English, over and over again. Although he was very particular about what went into the reservoir, he was significantly more particular about keeping my broken things sunk. One night, Grandpa caught me attempting to dredge up the fractured remains of my favorite action figure with a bit of a fishing line. He didn't mince words. "If you ever defile these gracious waters again, I'll kill you, child. Or worse." As someone that's always been riddled with anxiety, none of this improved my performance. It only made me more skittish, more impulsive, and more dysfunctional. So I can't say I was upset when the old coot died, drowned in his own damn reservoir. Bon voyage, asshole. I took the final drag of my cigarette, pulled the broken watch from my pocket, and lobbed both of them into the reservoir. They sank with a dull plop. I expected solace. Much as the punishment ceremonies terrified me, I did recall feeling a gentle warmth flooding through my body when broken things drifted beneath the surface. That night, though, I experienced no warmth. Instead, a strange apprehension started crackling down my spine. Then, from behind me, "What are you doing on my property, and what the hell did you just throw in there?" I shot around. There was a man at the edge of the clearing. The barrel of a rifle gleamed in the moonlight. "I'm so sorry. I used to live here. Or, not me exactly. My family did, and I thought the property was abandoned, so I didn't think it was trespassing." "You know what? Save it for the cops." "What? No, please. I'll leave. I need to go. Please." I continued to stutter out a meek appeal, but I didn't get the sense that the man was still listening. To this day, I don't know what came over me. The possibility of my mess-up being discovered, or having to explain why I'd stolen Mickey's watch in the first place, turned me into an animal. It wasn't rational, it's just what happened. There was a soft crunch in the woods. He peered over his shoulder. I grabbed a rock off the ground and launched myself across the clearing. The man snapped forward. There was a click. I flinched, but nothing happened. The rifle was jammed. I sped up. More hollow clicks emanated through the clearing, rapid and fearful. Click, click, click. I was nearly on top of him. A cloud passed over the moon. The clearing darkened. I never got a good look at his intact face, and I suppose I'm thankful for that. He started to say something. I arched the rock over my head and brought it down. Vanishing was a simpler process back in the 90s. Wasn't much to it, really. I drove until the scenery looked different, stayed low, and kept my eyes on the news, anxiously awaiting the nationwide manhunt. No such manhunt ever came to be. Far as I could tell, at least, it wasn't the easiest thing to keep track of. I don't know who I killed, I just knew where they'd find his body. The more I thought about it, though, the more I realized they may never discover that poor man. Grandpa's estate wasn't exactly prone to foot traffic. The night after Mickey's death, I was on my way to Omaha. I planned on driving into the morning, but heavy snowfall forced me to stop. The 5-room, single-story motel I stayed at was memorably heinous. I jammed the rusty key into the lock and jerked the door open. A battalion of cockroaches skittered into the walls as the hazy lamps clicked on. The frizzy brown carpet had enough splotches and stains to resemble leopard print, and the bathroom reeked of ancient, untamed feculence, the type of caked-in, all-consuming shit stench that requires decades upon decades of intentional neglect to manifest. Not that any of that mattered, really. Even if I were lodging at the most bougie 5-star resort imaginable, swaddled in a Persian silk comforter, I don't think sleep would have come easy. It happened a little after midnight. The room was silent. I was lying on top of the bed's ratty blanket, staring at the ceiling, mentally reviewing my laundry list of mess-ups, when I finally began to feel drowsy. I let myself drift, and I was nearly asleep. Movement jolted my eyes wide open. Strange shadows danced quietly along the wall. I shot upright and rubbed the sleep from my eyes, but nothing changed. Dark blobs ballooned and shrank across the surface with fluid motion, like I was staring into a lava lamp with pitch-black plasma. I traced the shadows to their origin, the room's large, front-facing window. I knew I shouldn't push aside the blinds and look. With complete and utter certainty, I knew that. But I also knew how to help someone who's choking, and I knew that murder is an unforgivable transgression, so what difference did knowing really make? I crept across the room, put my face to the blinds, and peeked through a slit. The small parking lot was blanketed with undisturbed snow. There were no cars on the road. A soft wind brushed bits of white from here to there, but the dead trees around the motel did not waver. The world looked still. Then I saw it. I thought it was a cloud at first, but it was too low, and it was moving too quickly through the sky, casting shadows as it drifted in the moonlight. No part of it made sense. The shape was larger than an SUV, but it was as thin as a ribbon, and it rippled through the atmosphere like an eel. I pressed my face into the cold glass, mesmerized. It was alien, bizarre, almost beautiful. All of a sudden, there was a change. It was no longer drifting. It seemed to be expanding, stretching like plastic wrap. But I was mistaken, and once I realized what it was actually doing, I rocketed from the window, heart convulsing against the back of my throat. The shape wasn't stretching, it was getting closer. I rushed past the bed and down the narrow bathroom hallway. The shadows deepened. I threw myself into the cramped space between the closet and the broken mini-fridge. Through shuddering breaths, I peered around the edge. I could barely see. The room had been swallowed by an eclipse. The shape was right outside the window. A muted clicking pierced the silence. It was scarcely audible, but violently alive, pulsing with frantic energy. A noise somewhere between the tapping of a pinball machine and the clattering of rat teeth. Unnatural, inhuman, continuous. It only receded when the sun began to rise. I packed my meager belongings and left, but I was no longer going to Omaha. I had no plan, no destination. I was just driving away. By sunset, I was entering a hotel in Des Moines, 200 miles from where I'd started. The night was quiet. The sky was clear. I thought I was safe. Then, around 4 a.m., right as I was drifting off, I heard it. The clicking. I didn't look outside, not that time. From there, every day was the same. I spent 6 months evading whatever was following me. I'd start driving around dawn, careening down the highway, dead set on creating as much distance as I could from the shape. The farther I got, the longer it seemed to take to catch up with me. But no matter how many miles I traveled, I never went a full night without hearing it. It wasn't a sustainable life. I was barely sleeping. My cash was dwindling. Then, one night, the unthinkable happened. My car died. I was stranded on a deserted stretch of road, miles from the nearest city, and the sun was already sinking. I did what I could to protect my sanity, frantically taping newspapers and fast food wrappers over the windows, barricading myself from the inevitable. Then, a little after midnight, it came. It began as a black speck on the windshield, but silently, it grew, and it grew. and by the time it was hovering inches above my car, that black speck had transformed into a monstrous penumbra, submerging me in hungry darkness. I curled into a ball and clamped my hands over my ears, but it was futile. I couldn't escape the clicking, and the more I listened, the more I began to hear language in the Discord. It was hard to make out, but it sounded like a single, repeating name. Noel. Was that his name? I wondered. Was the man I killed named Noel? That would explain it. I'd escaped arrest, sure, but could I really escape judgment? Maybe the shape was sent from God to torment me. Maybe this was my punishment. Maybe this is what I deserved. I knew I could step outside and face it. I came close, but ultimately I didn't. The following morning, I stumbled out of my car and started down the road. I was in tatters by the time I reached Portland. Body aching, mind frayed, desperate for somewhere to rest. I settled on the first place I saw, a kitsy little hole-in-the-wall bed and breakfast named Honey's Hoodoo and Hostel. Best decision I ever made. Inside, the place looked more like an apothecary than a hostel. Bright plants dangled from dusty pots, and the walls were crowded with animal skulls and dream catchers. I shuffled through a maze of narrow aisles to the front desk, where a slender woman with toffee-colored eyes glanced up from a dog-eared crossword book. I tried to speak, but she shushed me, spun around, and rummaged through a cabinet. Too tired to protest, I just waited. A minute later, she slid a key and a vial of clear liquid across the counter. Drink it. We'll figure out reimbursement once you get some sleep. Room 3. I slept for an uninterrupted 16 hours. Blissfully deep, dreamless rest. In the morning, I profusely thanked my soon-to-be wife. Honey turned out to be a real miracle worker, though the medicine she gave me wasn't anything magical. It was a sleep aid. Melatonin, valerian root, and a splash of bottom-shelf vodka for a bit of a kick. Sleep was a godsend, but it didn't fix everything. I still saw it. The shape, hovering above me, skulking through the night sky, blending in with the clouds. It was always there. I didn't understand why I'd begun keeping its distance, but I didn't dwell on it either. Time passed. I didn't tell her much until our son was born. Looking down the barrel of fatherhood, I came clean to Honey. I told her about Mickey's death and how I could have saved him, about my cold family and my strange, dogmatic grandfather. I even told her about the thing in the sky, though I downplayed some of the insanity. I told her about everything except Noel. I could never tell her about the man I killed. To her credit, she didn't judge me, though she didn't grant me clemency either. All she said was, "The deepest hells are usually the ones we dig with our own 2 hands, Lucas." Things were quiet for a long while. I buried the rest of my guilt and my shame in order to focus on my family. That seemed to do the trick until a few years ago. When my son turned 19, the same age I was when Mickey died, there was a change. Out of nowhere, something began waking me up in the middle of the night. It was sporadic at first, once a month, maybe less. Without warning, I'd bolt upright in bed like I'd been physically ripped from sleep. The same way you'd wake up to a smoke alarm blaring, but there'd never be any noise. No clicking, no shadows at my window, nothing at all. I doubled up on Honey's special sleep aid and tried to ignore it. Slowly, though, the frequency increased. Once a month to every other week, then every week, every few days, every night. I tripled the dose of my sleep aid, quadrupled it, added more vodka. Nothing helped. Then last week, it happened. Once again, I bolted upright, but the room wasn't silent. A faint noise curled into my ear, similar to the clicking, but not frantic. It was organized, controlled, rhythmic. I shut my eyes and listened. A sinking dread crawled through my body. The noise wasn't coming from the window. It was coming from right next to me. I opened my eyes and turned to face Honey. She was sleeping soundly. I leaned in. Closer. Close enough that my ear was resting on the front of her neck, and I felt something. There was something hard beneath her skin. Not bone, not cartilage. It was too broad, too flat, and up close, the sound was unmistakable. It wasn't a click. It was a tick, like from a watch. I lifted my head and looked at her. Honey's eyelids were closed, but to my horror, I could see her eyes glowing dully beneath them. A pearly light shining through the translucent membrane, fixed right on me, staring at me, judging me. That night, I left my family behind. I got in my car and drove south, and overhead, the shape followed. Locating Mickey's widow was surprisingly easy. She lived in a single-story ranchero on the outskirts of my hometown. The lawn was dense and unkempt. Neglected Christmas decorations lay strewn about, plastic elves and tangles of string lights peeking out of the overgrowth. The roof had holes big enough to be visible from the sidewalk. I breathed deep and began pacing up to the front door, trying not to ruminate on how the disrepair was likely downstream of my failure to act all those years ago. Jagged wood bit into my skin as I knocked. A stout woman with a gray ponytail and bits of red lipstick on her front teeth answered. Without preamble, I asked her if she was Mickey's widow. She nodded. The drive had given me ample time to plan out a concise, remorseful confession. But, in the moment, all that got thrown out the window. I barged into the woman's house and just started talking, told her everything. I used to work alongside her husband. I was there the night he choked. I could have saved his life. I skipped town the night he died, never looked back, and I was so goddamn sorry. When I was done, I waited for her to speak. I expected anger, revulsion, violence. Instead, all I got was confusion. You never heard, did you? I cocked my head. They did an autopsy on Mickey, and well, he died of a massive heart attack. The coroner said there was nothing anyone could have done to save him. My vision blurred. Nausea hit me fast and hard. The guilt, the shame, the boundless, unrelenting anxiety. It was all for nothing. I killed that man for nothing. As I drive, I find myself dwelling on what Honey said all those years ago. The deepest hells are usually the ones we dig with our own two hands. You know what that makes me think about? Something my grandpa dug with his own two hands. The reservoir, the stagnant water, the broken things. The punishment ceremonies, the old man on his knees, chanting unintelligible Vietnamese prayers and repeating a two-word phrase in English. That's when it hit me. If I couldn't save Mickey, then I never made a mistake. If I never made a mistake, I shouldn't have thrown this broken watch into the reservoir. The shape wasn't saying Noel. It was repeating the phrase, no hell. It's him, I think. I'm en route to my grandfather's now, hoping to get there before the sun sets. This all started with that broken watch. If I dredge it from the reservoir, maybe it'll stop. Maybe I can finally be free. Or, more likely, everything will just get much, much worse. And that's okay. All things considered, I deserve that, don't I? Guys, I'm honestly not too sure what to say about this one. I think this is the first time where I've read a story, and the scariest thing about it is the guilt. This guy lived his whole life with this cloud of guilt over him for something he didn't do. I mean, well, he did kill that one guy, but he literally killed him for no reason at all. Just honestly, very unfortunate. Anyways, let me know what you guys thought about this one down in the comments, and let's get on with the next one. It's from r/snowsleep from user Wisto. If your delivery driver says he forgot your drink, don't open the door again. I know how stupid this sounds because I used to read posts like this and think the same thing. Just don't open the door. Call the police. Just get out. That is what I normally say, guys. You never realize how useless all those thoughts are until you're standing barefoot in your hallway at midnight, holding a kitchen knife in one hand and your phone in the other, listening to someone breathe on the other side of your front door. It started with Thai food. I had just moved into my new apartment 3 weeks earlier. Nothing dramatic. No haunted backstory, no weird old building with a caretaker who warned me about the basement. Just a normal second-floor apartment above a row of shops. The kind of place where the hallway always smelled faintly of carpet cleaner and someone else's dinner. I'd moved there after my breakup with Lewis. We had been together for 4 years. He wasn't dangerous or evil or anything like that. He was just useless in that quiet, exhausting way that makes you feel like you're raising a grown man. When he finally left, I felt sad for about a week, and then mostly relieved. For the first time in a long time, this place was mine. My mugs in the cupboard, my clothes in the wardrobe. My music playing without him asking if we could put something else on. That night, I got home late from work. It had been raining all day and my shoes were soaked through. I didn't have the energy to cook, so I ordered from the Thai place down the road. Green curry, jasmine rice, spring rolls, and a Diet Coke. The app said 25 minutes. I changed into pajamas, washed my face, and sat on the sofa scrolling through my phone. I remember feeling almost peaceful. That's the part that bothers me now. How normal it all was. How close I came to having an ordinary, boring night. At 10:43, my buzzer went. I pressed the intercom. Hello? Delivery. His voice was soft, youngish maybe, hard to tell through the speaker. Second floor, flat 6. I know, he said. I frowned at that, but only for a second. Drivers get the flat number on the app. Obviously he knew. I buzzed him in and waited by the door. A minute later, there was a knock. When I opened it, he was standing too close. That was the first thing I noticed. Most delivery drivers step back after knocking. This one was right there, almost filling the doorway. He wore a black raincoat with the hood up and one of those thermal delivery bags over his shoulder. I couldn't see much of his face, just his mouth and a bit of stubble. Aaron? He asked. That's me. He handed me the bag. Enjoy your food. Thanks. I took it and was about to close the door when he said, Sorry, I forgot your drink. I looked into the bag. Curry, rice, spring rolls, no Diet Coke. It's fine, I said. Don't worry about it. I've got it downstairs. Honestly, it's fine. I'll bring it up. Before I could answer, he turned and walked away. I closed the door and locked it. I don't know why I locked it so quickly. Maybe because he'd stood too close. Maybe because he had said my name like he already knew me. Maybe because I live alone now, and living alone changes the sound of every small thing. I put the food on the coffee table and tried to shake it off. The curry was hot, the rice was still steaming, and for a few minutes I convinced myself I was being ridiculous. Then I found the receipt. It was folded under the spring rolls. Not the restaurant receipt, that was stapled to the outside of the bag. This was a plain white slip of paper, torn badly at one edge. At first, I thought it was just some kitchen note that had fallen in by accident. Then I saw my name. Aaron M., flat 6, lives alone, no dog. Chain lock only, bedroom window faces service alley, usually home after 7. I stared at it for a long time. My first thought was Lewis. It had to be Lewis. Some pathetic attempt to scare me, to make me call him, to make me feel like I still needed someone. It sounded exactly like the sort of thing he would think was clever after a few drinks. I picked up my phone and called him. He answered on the 5th ring. What? Did you send me something? What? Don't play dumb. Did you send someone to my flat? There was a pause, then a tired sigh. Aaron, it's nearly 11. I got a note in my takeaway. What note? One that says I live alone. Another pause. This one felt different. Are you serious? Yes. Where are you? In my flat, obviously. Lock your door. It is locked. No, properly lock it. That annoyed me. Even then, like he was suddenly the sensible one. I have locked it. Send me a picture. I almost told him to piss off, but I took a photo of the note and sent it. He called back 10 seconds later. That wasn't me. His voice had changed. He sounded awake now. Lewis, I swear on my mother, that wasn't me. Call the police. Before I could answer, someone knocked on my door. 3 soft knocks. Not loud, not aggressive, just polite. I stood in the middle of my living room with the phone against my ear. Aaron, Lewis said. Another knock. Then the delivery driver's voice. Forgot your drink. I didn't move. Lewis kept saying my name, but he sounded far away. The driver knocked again. I can leave it here if you want. I walked slowly to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. No delivery driver, no drink, nothing. I stepped back. My phone buzzed in my hand. A notification from the delivery app. Your driver is at your door. I looked at the peephole again. Empty hallway. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I don't know why I answered. I think my brain was still trying to make sense of it, still trying to turn it into something normal. Hello? The delivery driver said. You shouldn't have looked at the receipt. I couldn't speak. You were meant to eat first, he said. I dropped the phone. It hit the floor and the call stayed connected. I could hear his breathing through the speaker. Then the handle moved, slowly. Down, then up. Down, then up. I had locked the door, but he was testing it gently, like he didn't want to make too much noise. I picked up the phone and ended the call. My hands were shaking so badly it took 3 tries. Then I called 999. The operator asked what service I needed. Police, I whispered. What's happening? There's someone outside my flat. Are you in immediate danger? Yes, I think so. Is your door locked? Yes. Can you see the person? I looked through the peephole again. Empty hallway. No, I said, but he's there. As soon as I said it, the letterbox lifted. Just a little. A black gap opened near my knees. I stumbled back. The operator asked me what had happened. He opened the letterbox. Do not approach the door, he said. Go into a room with a lock if you can. My bathroom had a lock. It was cheap and flimsy, but it was something. I grabbed the biggest knife from the kitchen drawer and backed toward the bathroom. The letterbox clicked shut. Then the knocking started again. 3 knocks, pause. 3 knocks, pause. Aaron, he called. I locked myself in the bathroom and sat on the edge of the bath with the knife on my lap. The operator kept talking to me, calm and steady, asking questions I could barely answer. My address, my name, whether I had seen a weapon, whether there was another way into the flat. No, I said, just the front door. Then I remembered the note. Bedroom window faces service alley. My bedroom window. The one I had opened earlier because the flat smelled of paint and damp clothes. I stood so fast, the knife clattered into the bath. What is it? The operator asked. My bedroom window. Is someone trying to get in? I don't know. Stay where you are if the bathroom door locks. The problem was, from the bathroom, I couldn't see the bedroom. I couldn't see the hallway. I couldn't see anything. The flat went quiet. That was worse than the knocking. For a few seconds, all I could hear was the operator breathing through my phone and my own heart hammering in my ears. Then my bedroom door creaked. I had left it open. I knew I had. But I heard it creak. The sound was slow and careful, the sound of someone touching the door with their fingertips and pushing it wider. He's inside, I whispered. The operator said police were close. Close didn't mean inside the flat. Close didn't mean between me and him. A floorboard moved in the hallway, then another. He was walking toward the bathroom. I picked the knife back up and stood behind the door. My legs felt weak. I remember thinking I was going to die in pajamas, which is a stupid thing to think, but it was there in my head. I was going to die barefoot, in old pajamas with Thai food cooling on the coffee table. The bathroom handle dipped. Once, twice. Then his voice came through the door. You should have taken the drink. I covered my mouth with my hand. He laughed quietly. I'm not angry, he said. You just made it messy. The door moved in the frame as he pressed his shoulder against it. The bathroom lock was a tiny silver turn lock, the kind you use when someone might accidentally walk in while you're brushing your teeth. It was never meant to keep anyone out. He pressed again. Wood cracked near the latch. The operator was saying something. I couldn't understand her. Then there was a bang from downstairs. A voice shouted, "Police!" The pressure left the door. For 1 second, I thought he had run. Then the bathroom door burst open. He came through with his hood still up and a screwdriver in his right hand. I swung the knife without thinking. It caught his arm. He shouted and slammed into me, knocking me back against the sink hard enough to crack the mirror. I dropped the knife. He grabbed my wrist and squeezed so hard my fingers went numb. "Stupid," he said. That was all he got out. 2 officers came down the hallway shouting. One of them hit him from the side, and they both went into the bath. The other officer pulled me into the hallway and kept saying, "You're safe, you're safe, you're safe." Even though I didn't feel safe. I don't think I've felt safe since. They arrested him in my bathroom. His name was Daniel Price. At least that was the name he gave them. He wasn't the delivery driver assigned to my order. The real driver was a woman named Melissa who had been found in her car 3 streets away, unconscious but alive. Someone had hit her from behind after she collected my food. Daniel had taken her phone, her thermal bag, and her jacket. That would have been bad enough. Then they searched his car. They found printed receipts, dozens of them, maybe more. Names, addresses, notes. Some were crossed out, some had ticks next to them. Mine had a circle around it. The police wouldn't tell me much, they never do. They kept using words like ongoing investigation and potential link and recovered items. But one officer told me something by accident. He said, the others were lucky too. Then he stopped talking. Others. I stayed with Lewis that night, which tells you how scared I was. I sat on his sofa until morning and watched the rain run down the window. He made tea and kept apologizing for things that had nothing to do with him. By midday, I had convinced myself it was over. Daniel was arrested, Melissa was alive, the police had receipts. The locks were being changed. I would move again if I had to. Then my phone buzzed. A notification from the delivery app. I stared at it, confused, because I had deleted the app in the police station. I had watched it disappear from my screen. But there it was. Your driver's nearby. I opened the notification. The map showed a little bike icon moving down Lewis's street. I stood up so quickly, I spilled tea over my leg. Lewis asked what was wrong. The bike icon stopped outside his house. Then the doorbell rang. Lewis went pale. "No," I said, "don't." He walked to the front window and looked through the curtain. "There's no one there," he said. My phone buzzed again. "Your driver is at your door." Then another message appeared. "Forgot your drink." That was 3 days ago. I'm writing this from a hotel room under a name that isn't mine. The police have my phone now. They said there was no active order, no driver, no record of any notification being sent. But I saw it. Lewis saw the doorbell camera too. Empty porch, no one there. Just 3 knocks recorded by the audio. 3 soft knocks, pause. 3 soft knocks, pause. I don't know whether Daniel had someone working with him. I don't know whether he set something up before they arrested him. I don't know why the app keeps coming back on every phone I borrow, or why the notifications know where I am before I tell anyone. All I know is this. If you order food late at night and the driver says he forgot your drink, tell him to leave it outside. Do not open the door. Do not check the hallway. Do not believe the peephole. And if your phone says the driver is nearby after you've already deleted the app, get out before he knocks. Because last night at 10:43, someone slipped a receipt under my hotel room door. It had my fake name on it, my room number, no dog, traveling alone, bathroom lock weak. At the bottom, written in pen, there were 4 words. You still seem thirsty. This was a scary story, but also like a thriller. Like at this point, I want a police officer standing outside my door at all times, because that's just creepy. I love this comment, gratefully hugging my 3 loud-ass dogs who practically shoved their way through the door when I opened it to grab a delivery. The next story today is also from r/nosleep from user Linus287. I found a door in my apartment that wasn't there yesterday. I've lived in apartment 6B for 4 years. It's not a large place. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a narrow kitchen, and a living room with windows that look out over the back alley. I know every crack in the paint, every sound the pipes make at night, every place where the floorboards complain when you step on them. That's why I noticed the door immediately. It was in the hallway between my bedroom and the bathroom, where there had always been a blank wall. A white wooden door. Plain, old, perfectly ordinary. Except it had not been there the night before. At first I thought I was still dreaming. I stood in the hallway in my t-shirt and sweatpants. holding a mug of coffee I couldn't remember pouring, staring at the brass doorknob. There was no frame damage, no dust, no smell of fresh paint. It looked like it had always belonged there. I touched the wall around it. Solid. I touched the door. Cold. Not cool like wood in the morning, but cool like something kept underground. I called my landlord. "Very funny," he said. "I'm not joking." There was a pause. "What kind of door?" "What do you mean, what kind of door? A normal door." Another pause. "Don't open it." I almost laughed, but his voice stopped me. He didn't sound annoyed. He sounded afraid. "Mr. Keller," I said slowly, "why would there be a door in my hallway?" "I'll come over," he said. "Do not open it. Do not touch it again." Then he hung up. I stood there for a long time, looking at the door. The apartment was silent. Too silent. Usually, I could hear traffic from the street, my neighbor's TV, the old radiator clicking. But in that moment, everything had gone quiet, as if the whole building were holding its breath. Then someone knocked from the other side. 3 slow knocks. I dropped my coffee. It shattered on the floor, hot liquid spreading around my bare feet. The knocks came again. 3 times. Not loud, not desperate. Polite. Like someone waiting to be invited in. I backed away into the living room and grabbed the heaviest thing I could find, a cast iron pan from the kitchen. Then I waited. Nothing happened. 5 minutes passed. 10. The door stood there, white and still. At 9:17, my landlord arrived. He was usually a cheerful man. Round face, red cheeks, always smelling faintly of cigarette smoke and peppermint gum. That morning, he looked 20 years older. He pushed past me without saying hello and stopped in the hallway. When he saw the door, all the color left his face. "No," he whispered. "You know what this is?" He didn't answer. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a ring of keys. His hands were shaking so badly that the keys jingled like tiny bells. "What are you doing?" I asked. "Locking it." "From this side?" He ignored me and tried key after key in the brass lock. None fit. Then the knocking started again. 3 slow knocks. Mr. Keller froze. A voice came from behind the door. Soft. Female. "Martin?" My landlord stepped back as if he had been slapped. "Martin," the voice repeated. "I know you're there." I looked at him. "Who is that?" His voice opened, but no words came out. The voice behind the door sighed. It was a sad sound, almost human. "Martin, please, it's so dark." My landlord grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "You need to leave," he said. "What?" "Now. Pack a bag, stay somewhere else." "Are you insane? What's behind that door?" He looked at me then, and I understood something horrible. He did not know. Not exactly. Before I could ask anything else, the doorknob turned. Very slowly. Left. Right. Left again. Mr. Keller whispered something in German I didn't understand and pulled me toward the front door. That was when the voice changed. It became my mother's. "Daniel?" I stopped moving. My mother died when I was 16. Cancer took her slowly, then all at once. I had forgotten many things about her over the years, but not her voice. Never her voice. "Daniel," she said again from behind the door. "Honey, please help me." My landlord tightened his grip. "Do not listen." I could not breathe. "Mom?" The door creaked. Just a little. A thin black line appeared between the door and the frame. From inside came a smell I remembered instantly. Lavender soap, hospital sheets, rain on the day of her funeral. My eyes filled with tears before I could stop them. "Daniel," my mother whispered. "I waited so long." I pulled away from Mr. Keller. He slapped me, hard. The sound cracked through the apartment. I stumbled back, stunned. "Listen to me," he hissed. "That is not your mother." The door opened another inch. Behind it, there was no room, no closet, no hallway, only darkness. Not the kind of darkness you see when the lights are off. This was thicker, deeper. It seemed to move slightly, like black water. And from inside it, my mother began to cry. I hated my landlord in that moment. I hated him because part of me knew he was right. And I hated him more because another part of me still wanted to open the door. He dragged me out of the apartment. The second we crossed the threshold into the stairwell, all the sound came rushing back. Cars outside, someone coughing below us, a dog barking in another unit. Normal life. Behind my apartment door, something slammed. Once, twice. Then came my mother's voice, muffled now, but screaming. "Daniel, don't leave me again." I spent that night in a hotel. Mr. Keller refused to explain everything. He only told me that apartment 6B had been renovated in 1998 after a fire. 3 people had died in the building before the fire department arrived. One of them was his wife. Her name had been Anna. The next morning, he called a priest, then a locksmith. Then 2 men I had never seen before who arrived in a van with no company name on it. They went into my apartment together. Only one of them came back out. The priest was pale and shaking. The locksmith had blood on his shirt. Mr. Keller would not look at me. "What happened?" I asked. The locksmith pushed past me and left without his tools. Mr. Keller handed me an envelope. Inside was cash, a lot of it. "Move," he said. "What about my things?" "Leave them." "Are you serious?" He finally looked at me. His eyes were wet. "The door is gone," he said, "but now there's a window." I did not go back. Not for my clothes, not for my laptop, not for the box of photographs under my bed. I found another apartment across town. I changed my number. I tried to forget the whole thing. For a while, I almost did. Until tonight. At 2:13 in the morning, I woke to the sound of knocking. 3 slow knocks. Not from my front door, not from the hallway, from behind my bedroom wall. Then my mother's voice whispered, "Daniel, I found another way in." Geez, what a terrifying concept. What I really liked about this one is that they never fully explain what the door is. The scariest part is that leaving the apartment doesn't save him. Just when you think at the end that he's escaping this terrible thing, it just followed him. Anyways, let me know what you guys thought about that one. Shout out to the author, Linus287. Their Buy Me a Coffee link is going to be in the description of this video. The next story today is from r/no-sleep from user Let's Split Up, also known as Quincy Lee. You should definitely go to their website and check out quincyleestories.com. They're an amazing writer. I read their stuff on the channel all the time. I saw a creepy painting for sale online. Did not order it, but it arrived on my doorstep and now I can't get rid of it. I didn't order the painting. Let's get that out of the way right now. I was mildly buzzed, yes, but not so inebriated that I'd mistakenly click buy now and order the scariest painting I've ever seen in my life. Like most people, I like to look at stuff I'd never buy online. Last month it was houses I can't afford on Zillow. This month it's paintings. If I really like one, I might save it to make it my desktop theme. That's the extent of my commitment to supporting art. See, I'm too poor to afford to deck my walls in original artwork, even if I wanted to order a painting, which I didn't. Especially not this painting. It depicted a figure in an impressionist style, sort of like the famous Munch, The Scream, crossed with the style of Rembrandt, the figure all cloaked in darkness except for the illumination on the face. The face was the most horrifying part. A fleshy patchwork of light in the otherwise dark canvas, featureless, indistinguishable, like a nightmarish figure out of a dream. I remember staring at my phone for several long minutes, zooming in on that figure, wondering what it was about the not quite humanness of it that made it so creepy. Even through the phone screen, even with no eyes, I could swear I felt it watching me. I took a screenshot, sent it to some friends, asking if it wasn't the creepiest thing they'd ever seen in their lives. That conversation quickly devolved into us sending lots of scary art pictures back and forth, like classic paintings of spooky children, disproportionate babies, a little Bosch, and so on. Fast forward 3 days. There's a package on my doorstep waiting for me when I get home, wrapped in brown paper. I tear open the paper packaging, and it's the painting. That painting. The featureless smear of a face stares at me from the dark canvas. It looks so fleshy, I could almost sink my fingers into it. Now, I assumed, of course, that someone ordered the painting for me as a joke, but none of my friends would admit to it. The conversation turned to teasing about me being cursed. To me, this was just further evidence that one or all of them were playing what they thought was the world's most hilarious prank. And honestly, I thought it was kind of funny too, so I went along. I hung the cursed painting in my living room, and that was that. It should have gone down in the book of my life as a mildly amusing footnote, something to tell guests about when they came into my home and asked what the hell was that creepy painting on the wall. But a week after it arrived, I was sitting at my desk working when I swear I heard a quiet rustle. And you know how you can feel it when someone in your periphery is staring? The sensation was so strong, I turned around and I almost screamed. The painting had eyes, and they were watching me. And I swear to God, swear to you on everything holy, it blinked. Maybe the blink was just my imagining, but it definitely had newly painted eyes there in its fleshy, impressionistic blotch of a face. Smears of darkness with just a tiny hint of light reflecting from them. Of course, I snapped a photo and sent it to my friends. And of course, they all assumed I'd painted on the eyes myself. Even I had to admit, when I got up close, it was clear that new paint had been applied on top of the original. I sent another text to the group. All right, which one of you jokers have been in my house? Denials all around. Maybe it was a prank, I thought. Most of my close friends know where I keep my spare key. But the painting kept changing. The changes were so subtle, I honestly didn't notice at first. Even when I did, I assumed it was whoever had pranked me by buying the painting, that they were adding brushstrokes whenever we had get-togethers. It almost became normal, the way I'd see new additions, just a little at a time. We often joked about it, everyone wondering who the mystery artist was who kept adding details. My friends would later tell me they all honestly thought it was me. But what really started to creep me out was when the changes to the painting made it look like me. One day I woke up and walked out to a creepy, impressionistic portrait of myself and decided enough was enough. I took the painting off the wall, dragged it downstairs to the dumpster, and tossed it in. Good riddance. But when I came home from work, it was back on its place on the wall. I was beginning to question my sanity. I tossed it out again, but the next morning when I woke up, it was back on the wall, and its lip was curled, like it was smiling. I had to go to work, and since I didn't want to run down to the dumpster again, I just turned it around so it was facing the wall. At least that way, it couldn't watch me. When I came home from work, I considered trying to throw it away one more time, or burn it, but I was exhausted after a long day, and since it was still facing the wall, its eyes no longer following me, I left it there, had dinner, and spent the evening scrolling through images of exotic plants, my newest fixation. Decided I would deal with the creepy curse thing in the morning. I did notice, though, as I was getting ready for bed, that it was crooked. I straightened it on the wall and went to bed. In the middle of the night, I was woken by a loud crash. When I rushed out to see what had caused it, I found that the painting had fallen from the wall. Its frame was cracked. Frowning, I nudged it with my toe, flipped it over. The canvas on the other side was torn and empty, completely empty. There was no figure in the painting, and suddenly I had that feeling again so strong, that feeling of eyes. I backed to the corner of the living room, scanning all corners of my apartment. The sofa, the table, the kitchen area across the open bar, the windows. Where were the eyes watching me from? Where? I was still standing there with my heart hammering like I was about to go into cardiac arrest, looking in disbelief at a broken painting and wondering what was going on when I heard this patter of footsteps and a click. My bedroom door had just closed. Immediately, I called the police to report an intruder. But while I was on the phone with the dispatcher, trying not to sound insane when I described the painting and the figure that was missing from it, suddenly it struck me that this might be one more part of the prank, that one of my friends, the one who might have been making alterations to the painting, could have snuck in to make some final adjustments. And maybe after they accidentally knocked the painting off the wall and caused the crash, they ran into my room to hide from me. Not entirely plausible, but then neither were the fears I was babbling to this 911 operator. She assured me they'd send someone out. I think she assumed I was high as a kite, but also that it was better to be safe than sorry. Or maybe she just thought I needed a wellness check. I'd have thought so, too, after being on that call with me. While waiting for their arrival, in case it was a prank, I steeled myself and went to the bedroom door. Then, just to be on the safe side, I grabbed a kitchen knife. A knife I swore I wouldn't use unless I knew for sure it wasn't one of my friends. And then I went back to the bedroom door, shoved it open, and brandished the knife while yelling. Standing next to my bed was my reflection. No, not my reflection, but that's what it looked like. It was me. But the hair was messier, like the brushstrokes weren't quite finished, and the clothes were not quite right. Almost a strange mix of everything I wore all put together, like the painter couldn't decide on which outfit, so went with them all. But the smile was sharp enough, as were the eyes, and the not me looked at me and raised its hand. In that hand, it held a painted version of my knife. "Shit," I gasped. "Shit," its lips imitated. I don't know which of us lunged first. Probably the painted me. Real me was just standing there in shock. Next thing I knew, I felt the thunk of an impact in my stomach. And then, I don't even know how to describe. The painted knife handle was sticking out of me, and where the blade entered the skin, paint flecked away instead of blood. Instinct kicked in, and I fought like a wildcat, slashing and stabbing, dragging my knife through that other me in a slicing motion, again and again. The other me opened its mouth in a scream, but all I heard was the ragged sound of canvas ripping. It made a final effort to cut through me, but then my last slice tore it in two. It went limp, only a ragged piece of canvas. I was bleeding from a deep gash in my belly. I believe I lost consciousness. Paramedics later told me they'd found me on the floor, bleeding from a knife wound. Draped over me was a canvas that I'd apparently cut free from the broken frame. They made me get a psych eval. You see, there was no evidence of anyone else in my apartment. The authorities believed that I got angry at the painting, tore it apart, and somehow accidentally stabbed myself in the frenzy. When I finally returned home, the painting, the broken frame, and what was left of the canvas were gone. Not a trace of them, not a scrap. And I've been wondering ever since, what would have happened if I hadn't woken up? Was it going to kill me? Or was it going to somehow put me in the painting and perhaps take my place? I'll never know, because the painting is gone. Gone. From my life, at least. But here's the thing. One of my friends sent me a link yesterday, told me they stumbled across it on an art website. The painting is back up on sale. For the love of God, do not buy. That was a crazy one. Anyways, that's all the scary Reddit stories in Minecraft I have for you today. If you guys enjoy long videos like this, don't forget to drop a like and subscribe, and maybe go check out my main channel where I upload every other day. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Peace.